Cold rain hammered against the windows of Chicago's most feared mansion, while a blonde woman in a wedding dress stood frozen in front of the man everyone called the Devil, Luca Moretti, the paralyzed mafia boss who destroyed empires from a wheelchair. 3 hours ago, Vivian Hale's father signed a contract selling her like cattle to erase his debts. Now she was trapped in a bedroom with a man whose dark eyes carried something far more dangerous than violence. Loneliness so raw it could break her if she got too close. The marriage was supposed to be temporary, a business transaction, 6 months and done. But when Luca rolled closer through the shadows and whispered, "I don't want your pity, I want something real," Vivian felt her entire life crack open, because the monster everyone warned her about just asked for the one thing she didn't know how to give. If you're watching this story unfold, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels. Now let's dive in. The dress weighed more than Vivian expected. White silk and lace imported from somewhere in Europe her father couldn't pronounce, but paid for anyway with money he didn't have. It pooled around her feet like spilled milk on the marble floor of the Moretti estate's master bedroom, and every time she breathed, the corset reminded her she was trapped. Luca Moretti sat 15 feet away in his wheelchair, silent as stone. The ceremony had ended 2 hours ago in the mansion's private chapel. No guests except her father, Luca's attorney, and 2 men in expensive suits who looked like they'd killed people before breakfast. The priest stammered through the vows so fast, Vivian barely heard her own voice agreeing to them. Then Luca's hand, calloused, warm, surprisingly gentle, slid a platinum ring onto her finger, and it was done. She belonged to him now. On paper, anyway. "You can sit down," Luca said finally. His voice was low, rougher than she expected, like gravel wrapped in smoke. Vivian didn't move. Her legs felt welded to the floor. "I'm not going to hurt you." He rolled closer, the wheelchair's wheels barely making a sound on the expensive rug. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" The words came out sharper than she intended, but fear did that sometimes, turned into anger because anger was easier to carry. Luca stopped a few feet away, studying her with eyes so dark they looked black in the low light. His face was all hard angles and old scars. A thin white line ran from his left temple down to his jaw. Another disappeared beneath the collar of his shirt. The tabloids loved showing before and after photos. The young, handsome crime prince who walked like a king versus the scarred man in the wheelchair who ruled through fear alone. "It's survival," he said quietly, "for both of us." Vivian's laugh came out bitter. "You're worth $500 million. You don't need to survive anything." "Money doesn't fix everything." His gaze dropped to the wheels of his chair just for a second before snapping back to her face. "Your father owed the Calabrese family $3 million. You know what they do to people who can't pay?" She did. Everyone in Chicago knew. The Calabrese syndicate didn't just kill debtors. They made examples out of them. Bodies turned up in pieces scattered across the city as warnings. "My father's debts aren't my responsibility." "They are now." Luca's tone didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Not cruelty. Something worse. Understanding. He signed the contract. "You're the collateral. If I hadn't bought the debt, you'd be dead or worse by now." The room tilted slightly. Vivian grabbed the bedpost to steady herself, her knuckles going white against the dark wood. "So you're my savior now? Is that the story you tell yourself?" "I'm not anyone's savior." Luca wheeled closer again, stopping just within arm's reach. "But I'm also not the monster your father probably described. He said you killed 17 men in one night. 19. No hesitation, no apology. But they tried to kill me first." The honesty was somehow worse than a lie would have been. Vivian's breath caught in her throat, and she hated how her body betrayed her, pulse racing, skin flushing hot then cold, hands trembling just enough to notice. "Why did you agree to this?" she whispered. "You could have bought the debt and let my father deal with the consequences. You didn't have to marry me." For the first time, something cracked in Luca's expression. Just a hairline fracture, but it was there. "I have my reasons." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting tonight." They stared at each other while rain continued hammering the windows and distant thunder rolled across the city. Vivian wanted to scream, wanted to run, wanted to wake up and discover this was all some nightmare her brain conjured after too much wine at dinner. But the ring on her finger was real. The dress was real. The man in the wheelchair watching her with eyes that carried too much weight was real. The contract says 6 months, she said finally. Then I'm free. If that's what you want. It is. Luca nodded slowly, but his jaw tightened like he was biting back words. Then we have an agreement. 6 months. You live here, play the role of my wife in public, and when the time's up, you walk away with enough money to disappear anywhere in the world. And you get what exactly? His smile was brief and joyless. Legitimacy, respectability, the kind of image that keeps federal prosecutors from knocking on my door. He paused. And maybe some company that doesn't want me dead. The last part came out quieter, almost vulnerable, and it caught Vivian completely off guard. She'd expected threats, expected coldness, expected the devil of Chicago everyone warned her about. Instead, she got this. A man who looked exhausted in ways sleep couldn't fix. I have rules, Luca continued, his voice hardening again. You don't leave the estate without security. You don't talk to reporters. You don't contact your father unless I approve it first. And you don't go into the east wing of the house. Why not? Because I said so. Vivian's temper flared hot. I'm not a prisoner. No, you're my wife. The word landed like a stone between them. And my enemies would love nothing more than to hurt me by hurting you. So you follow the rules or people die. Understand? She didn't answer. Couldn't. The weight of everything pressed down so hard her lungs forgot how to work properly. Luca's expression softened slightly. There's a room prepared for you down the hall. Private bathroom, walk-in closet, everything you need. The staff will bring your things up tomorrow. We're not sharing this room? Not unless you want to. He held her gaze. I'm not going to touch you, Vivian. Not without permission. This marriage might be a transaction, but I'm not a rapist. The relief that flooded through her was so intense it made her dizzy. She sagged against the bedpost, suddenly aware of how terrified she'd been of this exact moment. How many nightmare scenarios her brain had constructed on the silent drive from the chapel to the bedroom. Thank you, she whispered. Luca's jaw worked silently for a moment before he nodded. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. Why? Because the whole city's going to know you're mine by morning. He turned the wheelchair toward the door. And Chicago doesn't play nice with new mafia wives. He was halfway across the room when Vivian's voice stopped him. Luca. He paused but didn't turn around. What happened to her? Vivian asked quietly. The woman you were engaged to before. The one who died. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. When Luca finally spoke, his voice was hollow. Car bomb. Meant for me. She was in the passenger seat. A pause. They never found all the pieces. Vivian's hand flew to her mouth. That's who I am, Luca continued, still not looking at her. That's the world you married into. So when I tell you to follow the rules, it's not about control. It's about keeping you alive long enough to collect your money and disappear. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Vivian alone in the enormous bedroom with nothing but the sound of rain and her own ragged breathing. She lasted 5 minutes before the tears came. Morning arrived with pale gray light filtering through curtains she didn't remember closing. Vivian woke disoriented, still wearing the wedding dress, mascara smeared across the silk pillowcase. Her body ached like she'd been in a fight. Maybe she had been, just not the kind that left visible bruises. Someone knocked softly on the door. Mrs. Moretti? A woman's voice, older, accented with something Eastern European. May I come in? Mrs. Moretti. The name felt like wearing someone else's skin. Yes. The door opened to reveal a slim woman in her 60s with sharp cheekbones and kind eyes. She carried a tray with coffee, fruit, and toast arranged like art. I am Irina, she said, setting the tray on the bedside table. I manage the household staff. Mr. Moretti asked me to help you settle in. Vivian sat up slowly, her corset digging into ribs that already felt bruised. Is he here? He left for the city office 2 hours ago. Business meeting. Irina's gaze swept over the wrinkled dress with professional neutrality. Would you like help changing? 20 minutes later, Vivian stood in front of the bathroom mirror wearing soft cotton pants and a cashmere sweater someone had left folded on the dresser. Her size exactly. Her preferred colors. Like Luca had studied her before they even met. The thought should have been creepy. Instead, it was just unsettling. The closet has been stocked with clothes in your size, Irina explained from the doorway. Shoes, jewelry, everything. If something doesn't fit or you need anything else, write a list. Who picked them out? Mr. Moretti hired a personal shopper. He was very specific about the style. A small smile. He wanted you to be comfortable. Vivian stared at her reflection. Pale skin, dark circles under blue eyes, blonde hair tangled from sleep and tears. She looked like a ghost wearing expensive clothes. "Can I leave the estate?" she asked. Irina's expression shifted slightly, sympathy mixed with regret. "Not without security approval, Mr. Moretti's orders." "So I'm a prisoner. You're protected." Irina stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Do you know how many attempts have been made on his life in the past 3 years?" "No." 47. 47 times someone tried to kill him," she paused. "And now you wear his name. That makes you a target too." The coffee turned to acid in Vivian's stomach. Irina's hand settled gently on her shoulder. "Give it time, child. Mr. Moretti is not an easy man, but he is not cruel. Not to those under his protection." After Irina left, Vivian spent an hour exploring her new prison. The room was larger than her old apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people's annual salary. The closet held enough designer clothes to stock a boutique. The bathroom had heated floors and a shower with 6 different settings. It was all beautiful, all suffocating. She found Luca in the library that afternoon. The estate's library occupied the entire west wing of the mansion's second floor, 2 stories of mahogany shelves stuffed with leather-bound books and first editions worth small fortunes. Luca sat near the windows in his wheelchair, papers spread across a desk wide enough to sleep on, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what the alderman wants," he said into the phone, his voice cold enough to freeze blood. "Tell him he takes the offer, or I pull funding from his entire ward and watch him lose the next election." A pause. "Good. Call me when it's done." He hung up and looked at Vivian standing in the doorway. "You're supposed to rest." "I'm not tired." "Then read something. The collection's extensive." Vivian walked deeper into the room, trailing her fingers along book spines. "Did you read all these?" "Most of them." Luca set the phone down. "I had a lot of time after the bombing. Books don't care if you're in a wheelchair." The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut. "What are you working on?" She nodded at the papers covering his desk. "City council vote. There's a property development deal that needs to pass by Friday." "Legal or illegal?" His laugh was short and humorless. "Both. That's how Chicago works." Vivian reached the windows and stared out at the gardens. "Do you ever miss it?" "Miss what?" "Walking." The silence stretched so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Every goddamn day." She turned to find him staring at his legs like they belonged to someone else. The hatred in his expression was so raw it hurt to witness. "The doctor said I'd never move below the waist again," he continued quietly. "Spinal damage, too severe, nerve pathways destroyed. They used medical terms that all meant the same thing. I'm broken." "You're not broken." "I can't walk, Vivian. I can't run. I can't stand up and fight like I used to." His hands gripped the wheelchair's armrests hard enough to make the leather creak. "I'm half a man pretending I'm still whole." "That's bullshit." Luca's head snapped up, eyes flashing. Vivian crossed the room until she stood directly in front of him. "You're not half of anything. You're still breathing, still thinking, still running an empire that terrifies half the city. That's not broken. That's surviving." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe not, but I know what giving up looks like." Her voice dropped. "My mother did it. After my father gambled away everything we had, she just stopped fighting, stopped trying. One morning I found her in the bathtub with empty pill bottles lined up on the sink like soldiers. The memory still tasted like copper. So don't tell me you're broken when you're still here fighting. That's more than a lot of people manage." Luca stared at her with something unreadable in his eyes. Then, slowly, his grip on the armrest loosened. "I'm sorry about your mother." Me too. They stayed like that, her standing, him sitting, rain starting to fall outside again, until Luca cleared his throat and looked away. There's a dinner tonight, he said, his tone shifting back to business. Fundraiser at the Drake Hotel. Political donors, business leaders, the usual crowd. I need you there. As what? Your trophy wife? As my partner. He met her gaze again. People need to see us together, see that the marriage is real. It's not real. Then we pretend. His voice softened slightly. Please, one dinner. I'll make sure you're protected the entire time. Vivian wanted to refuse, wanted to lock herself in a room and pretend the rest of the world didn't exist. But something in Luca's expression, vulnerability hiding behind steel, made her pause. Fine. One dinner. Relief flickered across his face before the mask slammed back down. Irina will help you get ready. We leave at 7. The Drake Hotel's ballroom glittered like something out of a dream. Crystal chandeliers threw light across marble floors while men in tuxedos and women in designer gowns mingled beneath vaulted ceilings decorated with gold leaf. A string quartet played near the windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Waiters circulated with champagne and appetizers that probably cost more per bite than Vivian used to spend on groceries. She felt like an imposter wearing a midnight blue dress that hugged her body in ways that made her self-conscious. Irina had swept her hair into an elegant updo and applied makeup that somehow made her look older, more sophisticated, less like the terrified girl who'd cried herself to sleep the night before. Luca appeared beside her in a black tuxedo that fit him perfectly despite the wheelchair. He'd shaved, tamed his dark hair, and somehow managed to look both dangerous and respectable at the same time. Ready? He asked. No. Good. Neither am I. He offered his hand. Stay close. Some of these people are worse than the criminals I deal with. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of introductions and forced smiles. Vivian shook hands with aldermen and CEOs, while Luca navigated conversations with the precision of a surgeon cutting out cancer. People approached with false warmth and genuine fear. Everyone wanted something. Everyone was terrified of being refused. That's Vivian, my wife. Luca said over and over, his hand finding hers each time. The touch was warm, possessive, almost protective. The crowd's reactions ranged from polite congratulations to barely concealed disgust. Vivian felt their eyes cataloging everything, her dress, her jewelry, the way she stood slightly behind Luca's wheelchair like she wasn't sure where she belonged. She's beautiful, one woman said, her smile sharp as knives. You're a lucky man, Luca. I know, he replied smoothly, squeezing Vivian's hand. I married up. The woman laughed, but her eyes stayed cold. They were standing near the bar when everything changed. A man approached from the crowd. Tall, silver-haired, expensive suit, face Vivian didn't recognize. But Luca's entire body went rigid the moment he appeared. Moretti, the man said, his voice carrying too much confidence. Congratulations on the wedding. I hope this one lasts longer than your last engagement. The temperature dropped. Luca's grip on Vivian's hand tightened almost painfully. When he spoke, his voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that came right before explosions. Senator Carver, I'd say it's good to see you, but we both know I'd be lying. Carver smiled like a shark. I heard you bought yourself a wife to improve your image. Very strategic. Though I wonder if she knows what she signed up for. Careful, Luca said softly. You're about 3 seconds away from something you'll regret. Threatening a U.S. senator in public? That's bold even for you. Carver turned his attention to Vivian. Has he told you about Sarah yet? The fiancée who died because of his lifestyle? Vivian felt the blood drain from her face. Or maybe he mentioned the FBI investigation. The racketeering charges they're building? This marriage won't protect him forever. That's enough. Luca's voice came out lethal. Walk away, now. But Carver leaned closer, lowering his voice to a whisper that still carried. She's going to end up just like the last one. Dead because you're too arrogant to see the danger coming. What happened next occurred in less than 2 seconds. Luca's hand shot out, grabbed Carver's tie, and yanked him down to eye level with strength that shouldn't have been possible from a wheelchair. His other hand moved to his jacket, toward a gun Vivian suddenly realized he was carrying. Touch my wife. Threaten her. Even think about her the wrong way, Luca said quietly, each word precise as a blade. And I will make sure they never find your body, senator or not. Do we understand each other? Carver's face went white. Security materialized from nowhere. Luca's men, not the hotels. They surrounded the situation like sharks circling blood. The entire ballroom had gone quiet, everyone watching with horror and fascination. Mr. Moretti, one of the security guards said carefully, we should go. Luca released Carver with a shove that sent the senator stumbling backward. Then he turned the wheelchair with controlled precision and looked at Vivian with eyes that were still burning with rage. We're leaving. The ride home was silent except for rain hammering the SUV's roof. Luca stared out the window while his jaw worked like he was chewing glass. Vivian's hat shook in her lap. They were halfway back to the estate when she finally spoke. You were going to shoot him? Yes. In front of 200 witnesses? Yes. That's insane. Luca turned to face her, and the raw fury in his expression made her breath catch. No one threatens you, not while you're wearing my name. I don't care who they are. I'm not actually your wife, Luca. This is just a contract. I know what it is. His voice dropped lower, rougher. But they don't. And as long as people think you're mine, I will protect you like you're mine. That's how this works. The words hung between them like lightning before thunder. Vivian stared at him, at the scars on his face, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the wheelchair, like it was all that kept him from flying apart. And somewhere beneath the fear and confusion, she felt something shift. Not attraction exactly, not yet, but recognition. She was looking at a man who'd lost everything and rebuilt himself from broken pieces. A man who everyone called a monster, but who'd just risked his freedom to defend a woman he barely knew. Thank you, she whispered. Luca's expression softened slightly. Don't thank me. That's just survival too. They didn't speak again until the SUV pulled through the estate's gates. Rain had turned the gardens into something dark and wild. Lightning cracked across the sky. Vivian was halfway out of the vehicle when Luca's voice stopped her. Vivian. She turned back. Carver was right about one thing, Luca said quietly, not meeting her eyes. Being connected to me is dangerous. If you want to break the contract and disappear tonight, I'll arrange it. New identity, new city, enough money to start over, no questions asked. The offer hung in the air between them. Vivian should have taken it, should have run while she still could. Every logical part of her brain screamed that staying was suicide. But she thought about Luca grabbing that senator by the tie. Thought about the raw protective fury in his eyes. Thought about how he'd called her his partner, not his possession. 6 months, she said finally. That was the deal. Something flickered across Luca's face. Surprise, maybe relief, before the mask fell back into place. 6 months, he agreed. Vivian walked into the mansion alone, water dripping from her hair, dress ruined by rain. She made it to her room before the shaking started, before the reality of what almost happened crashed over her like a wave. She'd married Chicago's most dangerous man, and somewhere in the past 24 hours, she'd stopped being completely terrified of him. That should have been comforting. Instead, it was the most frightening thing of all. 3 days passed in careful distance. Vivian explored the estate, read books from the library, and avoided Luca except for silent meals where they sat across from each other like strangers. The staff treated her with polite deference. The security guards nodded when she passed, but she was still a prisoner in everything except name. Then the newspapers arrived. Irina brought them with breakfast, 5 different Chicago papers, all carrying the same story on their front pages. Moretti's mystery. Bride. Mob boss. Buys wife to dodge charges. Debt payment or true love. Inside Chicago's most dangerous marriage, Hale family sells daughter to crime lord in desperate deal. The photos were brutal. Vivian climbing out of the SUV at the Drake Hotel looking terrified. Luca grabbing Senator Carver by the tie with murder in his eyes. The two of them together, her hand in his, both their faces hard as stone. The articles were worse. Every paper painted her as either a gold-digging opportunist who trapped a disabled mafia boss or a pathetic victim sold by her desperate father. They detailed her family's debts, her mother's suicide, her failed teaching career, Everything private was now public. One columnist called her the latest in a long line of beautiful, naive women destroyed by Luca Moretti's world. Another wrote, "How long until this marriage ends the same way his last engagement did? In blood and fire." Vivian barely made it to the bathroom before she threw up. She found Luca in his office an hour later. He sat behind a massive desk covered in newspapers, his face carved from granite. "I'm sorry," he said without preamble. "I should have anticipated this." "They know everything." Vivian's voice came out hollow. "Every mistake, every failure. My entire life is entertainment now." "I know." "No, you don't." She threw one of the papers at him. It hit his chest and fell to the desk. "You're used to this. You're used to being called a monster and a criminal, but I'm not. I was nobody, and now I'm the pathetic blonde who married Chicago's mafia boss for money." Luca closed his eyes briefly, pain flickering across his features. "What do you want me to do?" "Make it stop." "I can't." "You control half the city." Her voice broke. "You make people disappear with a phone call, but you can't stop them from destroying me?" "Not without proving them right." He rolled around the desk until he was directly in front of her. "If I go after the press, I confirm everything they're saying, that I'm violent, controlling, a monster who bought a wife and won't let her have a voice." "Then what's the point?" Tears streamed down Vivian's face. "What's the point of all this power if you can't protect the people you're supposed to care about?" "I'm trying." "You're not trying hard enough." The words exploded out of her like shrapnel. Luca flinched like she'd hit him. They stared at each other while Vivian's chest heaved and fresh tears carved tracks through her makeup. She wanted to take it back, wanted to apologize, but the hurt and humiliation were too big to fit inside her anymore. "You're right," Luca said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not doing enough. I brought you into this world and I didn't prepare you for how cruel it would be. So what now?" "Now you decide." He held her gaze. "You can hide here and let them win. Or you can fight back." "How?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You do what I taught myself to do after the bombing. You take everything they use against you and turn it into armor." "I don't understand." "They're calling you weak, desperate, a victim." His voice hardened. "So we show them you're none of those things. We show them you chose this, that you're not hiding, that you're my partner, not my prisoner." "But that's not true. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to look true." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and caught one of her hands in his. "Trust me. Please." Vivian stared at their joined hands. His was scarred, calloused, warm. Hers was shaking. "What do you need me to do?" "Date me." She almost laughed. "We're married." "Exactly. We skipped all the important parts." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "So we start over. We date. We let the city see us together choosing each other. No contracts, no obligations, just two people figuring out if they want the same thing. And if we don't, then in 6 months you walk away knowing you tried." A pause. "But at least they won't be able to call you a victim anymore." It was completely insane. It was also the first thing that made sense since the wedding. Vivian wiped her face with her free hand. "What does dating even look like when you're already married to someone?" "Dinner, conversation, getting to know each other the right way." Luca's voice softened. "No pressure, no expectations, just time. And if I say no, then I respect it, and we go back to being strangers living in the same house." She should have said no, should have kept the distance safe and clinical, but something in Luca's eyes, hope struggling against resignation, made her hesitate. "One dinner," she said finally. "Tomorrow night. Here at the estate. Nothing public." Relief flooded his features. "Deal." He released her hand and she immediately missed the warmth. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her one more time. "Vivian?" "Yes?" "For what it's worth, you're not pathetic. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met." She looked back at him, at the mafia boss in the wheelchair who'd lost everything and kept fighting anyway, and felt something crack open in her chest. "How do you figure that?" "Because you're still here," Luca said quietly. "After everything that's happened, you're still standing. That's not weakness. That's courage." The words followed her all the way back to her room. And that night, For the first time since the wedding, Vivian fell asleep without crying. The dinner happened in the estate's private dining room, a space Vivian hadn't seen before, all dark wood paneling and candlelight that made shadows dance across walls lined with oil paintings of people long dead. A table set for two sat near windows overlooking gardens turned silver by moonlight. Wine already breathing in crystal decanters, food that smelled like rosemary and butter, and something expensive. Luca was already there when she arrived, wearing a simple black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. No suit jacket, no tie, just a man trying to look less dangerous than he actually was. "You came," he said, and the relief in his voice was genuine. "I said I would." Vivian smoothed down the front of her dress. Something simple she'd found in the closet, dark green and soft. Nothing like the armor she'd worn to the Drake Hotel. "You look beautiful." The compliment caught her off guard, made heat crawl up her neck. "Thank you." They sat across from each other while staff served the first course, some kind of soup Vivian couldn't identify but tasted like heaven. The silence stretched awkward and thick until Luca cleared his throat. "So, dating." He said it like he was trying on unfamiliar words. "I'm supposed to ask you questions, get to know you. That's generally how it works. I'm not good at this." "Neither am I." That pulled a small smile from him. "Then we're both doomed." "Probably." Vivian took a sip of wine. It was the good stuff, the kind that costs more per bottle than her old monthly rent. "Ask me something." Luca studied her for a long moment. "What did you want to be before everything fell apart?" The question hit harder than expected. Vivian set down her wine glass carefully. "A teacher, elementary school. I had a degree and everything. Even got hired at a school on the north side." "What happened?" "My father gambled away the money I'd saved for my teaching certification exam. Then he took out loans in my name to cover his debts. By the time I found out, my credit was destroyed and the school had already hired someone else. The old bitterness rose up like bile. Turns out you can't teach kids when your own father's stealing your future." Luca's jaw tightened. "Did you ever confront him?" "Once. He cried and promised he'd fix everything. That was 2 years ago." She laughed without humor. "Guess he finally found a solution." "Selling you to me." "Selling me to you." The words sat heavy between them. Luca reached for his own wine, drained half the glass in one swallow. "I'm sorry, for what it's worth. It's not your fault." "Isn't it? I'm the one who agreed to the contract. You're also the one who kept the Calabrese family from killing me." Vivian met his eyes. "So I guess we're even." "We're not even close to even." His voice dropped lower. "But I'm trying." The second course arrived, something with lamb and vegetables arranged like art. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Vivian set down her fork. "My turn," she said. "What were you like before the bombing?" Luca's expression shuddered immediately. "Different." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." "Luca." He exhaled slowly, setting down his own fork with careful precision. "I was arrogant, reckless. I thought being young and powerful meant being invincible." A pause. "I took risks I shouldn't have taken. Trusted people I shouldn't have trusted. And Sarah paid the price for my stupidity." "Sarah was her name?" "Yeah, duh." His voice went rough. "Sarah Chen. We met at a charity gala. She was a corporate lawyer trying to stay as far away from my world as possible. Smart, funny. She called me out on my bullshit every single day." "She sounds amazing." She was. Luca's hands gripped the edge of the table. "We were supposed to get married that summer. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. But I made enemies faster than I could count them, and someone decided the best way to hurt me was through her." Vivian's chest tightened. "The car bomb." "They put it under the driver's seat of my Aston Martin, military-grade explosive, triggered by ignition." His voice had gone flat, mechanical, like he was reading from a police report. "I was running late that morning. Sarah offered to warm up the car. I said yes because I was on the phone with my attorney and didn't want to be bothered." Jesus. "The blast took out 3 cars and shattered windows a block away. They identified her using dental records." He looked up, and the pain in his eyes was so raw it hurt to witness. "I was 30 feet away when it happened, close enough to feel the heat, close enough to hear her scream." Vivian's hand moved across the table before she could stop it, covering one of his. Luca, don't. He pulled away gently. I don't deserve comfort for that. I put her in that car. It wasn't your fault. It was exactly my fault. His voice turned harsh. I knew I had enemies. Knew they'd come after people I loved, but I was too arrogant to think they'd actually succeed. Did you find out who did it? Something dark and terrible crossed Luca's face. Eventually. And I made sure they regretted it. He picked up his wine glass, stared into it like it held answers. 3 months after the bombing, I was still in physical therapy learning how to live in this chair. But I tracked down every single person involved. Took me 2 years to get them all. What did you do to them? Luca's eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw the devil of Chicago everyone feared. Things I'm not proud of. Things that made sure no one would ever try something like that again. The air in the room felt too thin. You're afraid of me now, he said quietly. No? The word came out steadier than Vivian expected. I'm afraid of what you're capable of, but I'm not afraid of you. You should be. Maybe. She picked up her fork again, forced herself to take another bite, even though her appetite had disappeared. But I'm still here. Something shifted in Luca's expression, surprise, maybe respect. He reached for his own fork and they finished the course in silence that felt less awkward than before. Like they'd crossed some invisible line and found themselves on the same side of it. Dessert was chocolate, something that melted on the tongue. Vivian ate slowly, while Luca watched her with an intensity that made her skin feel too warm. What? She asked finally. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone more fragile. Someone who'd break under pressure. He leaned back in his wheelchair. But you're tougher than you look. I had to be. My father made sure of that. Tell me about him. The request caught her off guard. Vivian set down her spoon. Why? Because he's the reason you're here, and I want to understand. She didn't want to talk about her father, didn't want to give him space in this room, in this moment, but something about the way Luca was looking at her, like he genuinely wanted to know, not just collecting information, made her relent. He used to be someone, she said quietly, back when I was a kid, successful real estate developer. My mother wore designer clothes and we lived in a house on the lakefront. Then he made a bad investment, lost everything. Instead of rebuilding, he started gambling, said he could win it all back. But he didn't. He never did. Just kept losing, kept borrowing, kept promising it would all work out. Vivian's throat felt tight. My mother couldn't take watching him destroy himself, so she took pills and left us both behind. How old were you? 16. Luca's expression darkened. And he kept gambling. He kept gambling, she laughed bitterly. Even used the life insurance money from my mother's death. Told me it was an investment in our future. 3 months later, it was gone. That's when you knew. That's when I knew he'd never stop, never change, that I was alone. The old wound opened fresh. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college. Lived in an apartment with 4 other girls. Ate ramen for dinner most nights. And the whole time he kept calling, asking for money. Did you give it to him? Sometimes, when I was stupid enough to believe his lies. Vivian's hands clenched into fists on her lap. The worst part is I still love him. Even after everything, even after he sold me to you like property, some pathetic part of me still hopes he'll wake up one day and be the father I remember from childhood. He won't. Luca's voice was gentle but firm. Men like that don't change. They just take and take until there's nothing left. I know. Do you? The question hung between them. Vivian wanted to be angry, wanted to defend her father out of some misplaced loyalty. But Luca was right. She'd known it for years, had just been too afraid to admit it out loud. Yeah, she whispered. I know. They sat in silence while candles burned lower and moonlight painted everything silver. Eventually, Luca cleared his throat. For what it's worth, you deserved better. From your father, from your life, from me. You didn't do anything wrong. I bought you like property. You saved my life. It's not the same thing. Maybe not. Vivian stood up, suddenly exhausted. But it's what happened, and I'd rather be here than dead. She was halfway to the door when Luca's voice stopped her. Same time tomorrow night? Vivian looked back at him, at the Mafia boss trying to figure out how to date his contract wife, at the broken man still fighting to be human. Yeah, she said. Same time. Silence. The dinners became routine over the next 2 weeks. Every evening at 8, they sat across from each other and talked. About books. About Chicago. About the empire Luca built and the life Vivian lost. Slowly, carefully, they learned each other's edges. Vivian discovered Luca collected first edition novels, that he taught himself to read in 4 languages during physical therapy, that he couldn't stand the taste of coffee but drank it anyway because staying alert kept him alive. Luca learned Vivian had wanted to teach because her 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Morrison, was the first person who made her feel like she mattered, that she loved thunderstorms but hated fireworks, that she cried during sad movies even when the endings were predictable. The conversations grew longer, more natural, less like interrogations, and more like actual dates. And somewhere in those 2 weeks, something shifted. Vivian started noticing small things. The way Luca's jaw tightened when he was frustrated. How his eyes softened when he talked about the charities he ran under front companies. The careful way he maneuvered his wheelchair through doorways like he'd mapped every inch of the estate in his mind. She started noticing he was beautiful. Not in the conventional way. The scars and the hardness made sure of that. But in the way broken things could be beautiful when you look close enough. Like stained glass that only made sense when light hit it right. It terrified her. One morning, she found Irina in the kitchen and asked the question that had been burning in her chest for days. Does he go out much? Luca, I mean. Irina looked up from the vegetables she was chopping. To the city office for meetings? Sometimes to deal with business that requires his presence. Why? I was just wondering. Vivian traced patterns on the marble counter. He seems lonely. He is lonely. Irina set down her knife. After Miss Chen died, he stopped seeing friends, stopped going to events unless necessary. He built walls so high even his family couldn't reach him. Does he have family? A sister in New York. They don't speak. Something sad crossed Irina's face. He pushed everyone away, decided being alone was safer than losing someone again. That's not living. That's just surviving. Perhaps. But surviving is all Mr. Moretti knows how to do anymore. The words followed Vivian through the rest of the day. She found herself watching Luca differently during dinner that night, seeing past the armor to the man underneath who was so terrified of attachment he'd rather stay isolated than risk another loss. What are you thinking? He asked, catching her staring. That you're afraid. Luca's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Excuse me? You're afraid. Of me. Of this. Of what happens if you let someone in again. She leaned forward. That's why you keep these dinners so controlled, so safe. You're testing me to see if I'll run. That's not... It is. Her voice stayed gentle. And I get it. After what happened to Sarah, after everything you lost, being afraid makes sense. But you can't live your whole life in a wheelchair inside a mansion waiting for the next bomb. I'm not afraid. But his voice lacked conviction. Then prove it. How? Vivian stood up, heart pounding. Take me somewhere. Show me the parts of your world you've been hiding. That's not safe. Nothing about this marriage is safe. She held his gaze. But I'm still here. So either trust me enough to let me in, or admit you're too scared to try. The challenge hung between them like drawn steel. Luca stared at her with something unreadable in his eyes. Then slowly, a small smile touched his lips. You don't fight fair. Neither do you. Tomorrow night. He rolled back from the table. I'll take you somewhere, but if I say we leave, we leave. No arguments. Deal. Vivian went to bed that night with her pulse racing and her mind spinning. She'd pushed him, challenged him, forced him to make a choice he wasn't ready for. And he'd said yes. The next evening, Luca appeared at her door in dark jeans and a leather jacket that somehow made him look even more dangerous. Ready? Where are we going? You'll see. The SUV drove them into the city's south side, through neighborhoods that got rougher with every block. Graffiti-covered brick walls. Groups of men stood on corners watching the vehicle pass with calculating eyes. This was the Chicago tourists never saw. The Chicago that existed in statistics about violence and poverty. They stopped in front of a building that looked abandoned. Boarded windows, crumbling facade, rust-stained walls. But when Luca led her through a side entrance, everything changed. Inside was a recreation center. Basketball courts filled with teenagers. Computer labs where kids worked on homework. A commercial kitchen serving hot meals. Music studios where young rappers practiced into microphones. Everywhere Vivian looked, life bloomed in spaces that should have been empty. "What is this place?" she whispered. "The Moretti Youth Foundation." Luca rolled through the halls while kids called out greetings. "We run 23 facilities like this across the city. After-school programs, job training, scholarships, everything these kids need to get out of the life I made money from." "You fund all this?" "Most of it. Some comes from legitimate businesses. Some comes from less legitimate sources." He glanced up at her. "I'm not a good man, Vivian, but I'm trying to make sure the next generation doesn't follow my path." A young girl, maybe 8 years old, ran up and wrapped her arms around Luca's wheelchair. "Mr. Moretti, you came!" His entire face softened. "Hey, Maya, how's the reading program?" "I finished 3 books this week." She beamed with pride. "Miss Johnson says I might skip a grade." "That's incredible." Luca pulled a wrapped package from his jacket. "I brought you something." Maya tore into it and gasped. "Harry Potter! I've been wanting this forever." "I know. Your teacher told me." The girl threw her arms around him again before running off to show her friends. Luca watched her go with something like pain in his eyes. "You know all their names," Vivian said. "Most of them. The staff keeps me updated." He rolled toward the basketball courts. "A lot of these kids come from families involved in the life. Drug dealers, gangbangers, people who work for me or my rivals. I figure if I can give them another option, maybe they'll take it." "Does it work?" "Sometimes. Last year we had 15 kids get college scholarships. 3 are in Ivy League schools now." He paused near the court's edge. "But we lost 2 to gang violence. One's in jail for murder, so the math's not great." Vivian watched teenagers running drills on the court, all different races, sizes, backgrounds, unified by sweat and competition. "Why haven't you ever shown this to the media? This could change how people see you. Because then it becomes about me instead of them." Luca's voice was firm. "The moment I use these kids for PR, it stops being charity and starts being exploitation. They deserve better than that." Something cracked open in Vivian's chest. She looked at this man everyone called a monster and saw someone trying desperately to balance the scales, trying to make up for all the damage his empire caused. "You're a good man," she whispered. "No, I'm really not." He met her eyes. "But I'm trying to be better than I was." They spent 2 hours there. Luca introduced her to staff and volunteers, showed her the computer labs funded by tech grants, the art studios where kids painted murals, the music production equipment that cost more than most people's cars. "We also run medical clinics," he explained, rolling through another hallway. "Free health care for families who can't afford insurance. We've treated over 3,000 patients this year." "How do you fund all this?" "Carefully. The legitimate businesses cover most of it. The rest comes from creative accounting." A slight smile. "Turns out running a criminal empire teaches you a lot about moving money quietly." They were leaving through the side entrance when someone stepped out of the shadows. A man. Tall. Lean. Scarred face and dead eyes. He moved with the predatory grace of someone who'd killed before and would kill again. Luca's entire body went rigid. "Back inside. Now." But Vivian didn't move. Couldn't. The man was staring at her with intensity that made her skin crawl. "So this is the new wife," he said, his voice carrying a thick Eastern European accent. "Pretty. Younger than the last one. I hope she survives longer." "Marcus," Luca's voice came out lethal. "Walk away." "I just wanted to see her, make sure she's worth all the trouble." Marcus smiled, and it was the most disturbing thing Vivian had ever witnessed. "You really think marrying some blonde girl is going to protect you from what's coming? What's coming is you in the ground if you don't leave right now." "Threats. Always threats with you, Moretti." Marcus took a step closer. "But you're not the man you used to be. You can't even stand up to fight me." Luca's hand moved toward his jacket so fast Vivian almost missed it, but Marcus was faster. He pulled a gun and aimed it directly at Vivian's chest. Go ahead, Marcus said calmly. Draw, see who's faster. Time stopped. Vivian's heart slammed against her ribs. The gun looked enormous, black metal gleaming under streetlights. One wrong move and she'd die here on the south side with her blood painting concrete. Don't! Luca's voice shook with barely controlled rage. This is between us. Leave her out of it. But she's not out of it. She's your weakness now, just like the last one. Marcus cocked his head. Tell me, Mrs. Moretti, do you know how Sarah Chen died? Did he tell you they found pieces of her 3 blocks from the explosion? Shut your mouth. Luca's hand stayed near his gun, but he didn't draw. Or maybe he told you how she screamed, how the fire was so hot it melted. I said shut up. Luca's roar echoed off buildings. Marcus laughed. There he is, the devil of Chicago. Still weak, still breaking. He lowered the gun slightly. You want to protect her? Then stay away from my territory. Stop funding these bleeding heart programs on my blocks. Or next time I see your pretty wife, I won't just talk. He disappeared into the shadows as quickly as he'd appeared. Vivian's legs gave out. She hit the wall, sliding down until she sat on cold concrete with her whole body shaking. Luca was beside her instantly, his wheelchair scraping pavement. Breathe, he commanded. Look at me. Breathe. She tried. Failed. Her lungs wouldn't work properly. The world tilted sideways. Vivian. Luca's hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. You're safe. I've got you. Breathe. The second time worked. Air filled her lungs. Her vision cleared. Reality snapped back into focus with brutal clarity. Someone had just put a gun to her chest. Someone had threatened to kill her. Because she married Luca Moretti. I'm sorry, Luca said, and he sounded destroyed. I'm so sorry. I should never have brought you here. Who was that? Marcus Volkov. He runs the Russian syndicate on the south side. Luca's jaw was so tight, Vivian thought it might crack. We've had a truce for 3 years, but tensions are rising. He's pushing into my territory, and I'm pushing back. He's going to kill me. No. The word came out fierce. I won't let that happen. You can't stop it. You said so yourself. You can't even stand up to fight him. The words came out cruel, laced with panic. How are you going to protect me when you can't even walk? Luca flinched like she'd hit him. Pain carved deep lines around his eyes. Vivian immediately wanted to take it back, wanted to apologize, but the fear was too big, too overwhelming. You're right, Luca said quietly. I can't protect you. Not the way I used to be able to. He rolled back, putting space between them. I'll take you home. First thing tomorrow, I'll arrange for you to leave the city. New identity, new life, far away from all this. That's it? You're just giving up? I'm being realistic. His voice stayed flat. Marcus was right. I'm not the man I used to be, and you deserve someone who can actually keep you safe. Fury exploded through Vivian's chest, burning away the fear. She pushed herself off the ground and stalked toward him. Don't you dare! Don't I dare what? Use this as an excuse to push me away. She grabbed the handles of his wheelchair, forcing him to look at her. I'm scared. I'm terrified. But I'm still here. So don't you dare take the coward's way out and send me away because protecting me is hard. This isn't about being a coward. Yes, it is. Her voice cracked. You're afraid, just like I said. You're afraid that if you let me stay, I'll end up like Sarah. So you'd rather send me away than risk losing someone else you care about. I don't care about you. But the lie was obvious. Yes, you do. Vivian leaned down until their faces were inches apart. You care. And it scares you more than Marcus Volkov ever could. Luca stared at her with something raw and desperate in his eyes. If you die because of me, then I die. But at least I'll have lived first. She released the wheelchair. I'm tired of running, Luca. Tired of letting fear make my decisions. So either we figure this out together, or you admit you're too broken to try. The word broken hit him like a physical blow. His hands gripped the wheelchair's armrests hard enough to make leather creak. Then slowly, something shifted in his expression. The resignation faded. Anger took its place, the kind of anger that kept men alive when everything tried to kill them. Together, he said finally, but you follow my security protocols, no arguments. Fine. And you tell me the truth from now on. No protecting my feelings. If you're scared, you say it. If you want to leave, you say it. Clear? Clear. They stared at each other while sirens wailed in the distance, and the South Side continued being the South Side. Brutal, unforgiving, raw. Then Luca pulled out his phone and made 3 calls in rapid succession. The words were code Vivian didn't understand, but the tone was pure violence. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Sending a message." He pocketed the phone. "Marcus wants a war. I'll give him one. But first, I'm making sure you're protected." They rode home in tense silence. Vivian's hand still shook. Luca stared out the window with murder in his eyes. When they pulled through the estate gates, additional security vehicles followed behind them. Men in dark suits took up positions around the property. "Your room's being moved to the master wing," Luca said as they entered the mansion. "Closer to mine, more secure." "Okay. And you don't go anywhere without at least 2 guards. Not even in the garden." "Okay." He looked at her sharply. "You're agreeing too easily." "Because I'm not stupid. That man wanted to kill me tonight, so yeah, I'll take the guards." She paused. "But Luca? What? This doesn't change anything. We're still dating, still figuring this out. One threat doesn't make me run." Something like wonder crossed his face. "You're insane." "Maybe." She smiled without humor. "Or maybe I'm finally done being afraid all the time." Vivian went to her new room, larger, more secure, with bulletproof windows and a panic button by the bed. She lay awake for hours listening to footsteps patrol the hallways, listening to her heart gradually slow down, listening to her mind replay Marcus Volkov's gun pointing at her chest. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt alive. For the first time in years, she'd stood her ground, fought back, refused to let fear win. And somewhere in that refusal, something had changed between her and Luca. The careful distance they'd maintained collapsed. The contract marriage stopped feeling like a transaction and started feeling like something real. It was the most dangerous thing that could have happened, and neither of them could stop it anymore. The next 2 weeks passed in escalating tension. Marcus Volkov made his move. 3 of Luca's front businesses burned within 5 days. A shipment of medical supplies meant for the youth center disappeared. 2 of his soldiers ended up in the hospital with broken bones and messages carved into their skin. "Back off, or next time it's your wife." Luca's response was surgical and brutal. Volkov's gambling operation lost its protection. His money laundering pipeline got exposed to federal investigators. His suppliers started refusing his calls. It was war. Just quieter than most people noticed, and through it all, Vivian stayed. She moved through the estate with armed guards shadowing her every step. She ate dinners with Luca where they talked about everything except the violence brewing outside. She read books in the library while he worked on his phone, orchestrating moves in a game she barely understood. One evening, she found him on the terrace overlooking the gardens. He sat alone in his wheelchair, staring at nothing, shoulders so tense they looked carved from stone. "You should be inside," he said, without looking at her. "So should you." "I'm fine." "You're not." Vivian pulled a chair over and sat beside him. "Talk to me. There's nothing to talk about." "Luca." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, finally, "I'm going to have to kill him." The words landed heavy as stones. "Marcus?" she asked. "Yeah, there's no other way to end this." His hands gripped the wheelchair's armrests. "He won't stop until one of us is dead, and I can't let it be you. There has to be another option." "There isn't." Luca turned to face her, and his eyes were hollow. "This is what my life is, Vivian. Violence, blood, solving problems by eliminating people. You wanted to see the real me? This is it." "I don't believe that's all you are." "Then you're lying to yourself." His voice turned harsh. "I've killed 43 people, ordered the deaths of dozens more. I've tortured men for information and burned down buildings with people still inside. That's not a monster pretending to be human. That's exactly what I am." "Stop it." "Why? Because the truth makes you uncomfortable?" He laughed bitterly. "You wanted me to let you in. This is what's inside. Darkness, violence, nothing worth saving." Vivian grabbed his face with both hands, forcing him to look at her. "You listen to me. I've seen your youth centers, seen you with those kids, watched you build something good from all that darkness. So don't you dare tell me there's nothing worth saving when I'm looking right at it." That doesn't erase what I've done. No, but it means you're more than your worst moments. Her thumbs brushed across his scarred cheekbones. You're broken, Luca. So am I. But broken doesn't mean worthless. Vivian, she kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't calculated, just pure instinct. The need to prove he was human, that he mattered, that someone saw past the violence to the man underneath. Luca froze for half a second. Then his hands came up to tangle in her hair, and he kissed her back like a drowning man finding air. It was desperate, messy, nothing like the perfect kisses in movies. His lips were rough. Her teeth caught his bottom lip. But it was real in ways that mattered more than technique. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca pressed his forehead against hers. This is a mistake, he whispered. I know. You're going to get hurt. Probably. Then why? Because I'm tired of being afraid. Vivian's hands stayed cupped around his face. And because somewhere in the past month, I stopped wanting to leave. Luca pulled back to stare at her with something like fear in his eyes. The contract says 6 months. I know what the contract says. If you stay longer, if this becomes real, I won't be able to let you go. Then don't. The words came out steadier than she felt. Don't let me go. Vivian, I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Choosing to stay even though it's dangerous and stupid and probably going to end badly. She smiled slightly. So stop trying to protect me from myself and just accept that I'm here. For a long moment, Luca just stared at her like he was trying to memorize her face. Then he pulled her into his lap and kissed her again, slower this time, more careful, like she was something precious he was terrified of breaking. They stayed like that while the sun set and stars emerged overhead, wrapped in each other. Two broken people who'd found something whole in the spaces between their scars. It should have felt like an ending. Instead, it felt like a beginning. The attack came 3 days later. Vivian was in the library reading when the first explosion shook the estate's walls. Books tumbled from shelves. Picture frames cracked. Alarms shrieked through the mansion like dying animals. 2 guards burst through the door. Mrs. Moretti, we need to move you now. What's happening? The perimeter's been breached, multiple hostiles on the grounds. Gunfire erupted somewhere below them, shouting, more explosions. The kind of chaos Vivian had only seen in movies. One guard grabbed her arm. Panic room, 3rd floor. Stay between us and don't stop moving. They ran through hallways while the mansion turned into a war zone. Windows shattered, doors splintered. Men in tactical gear poured through breaches Vivian didn't understand. Her guards fired back, dropped 2 hostiles, kept moving. Halfway up the stairs, something exploded to their right. The blast threw Vivian forward. She hit the landing hard enough to see stars. Her ears rang. Blood ran down her face from somewhere. Move! The guard hauled her upright. They made it to the 3rd floor, down the hall, toward the panic room's reinforced door, 10 feet away. 5. Then one of her guards went down with a bullet through his neck. The second guard shoved Vivian forward. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but Mr. Moretti. She stumbled through the entrance, turned back just in time to see the guard take 3 shots to the chest. He collapsed in a spreading pool of red. A man appeared in the hallway. Tall, scarred, dead eyes. Marcus Volkov. Hello, Mrs. Moretti, he said, walking over the guard's body like it was trash. We need to talk. Vivian slammed the panic room door. Heavy steel, electronic locks, supposedly impenetrable. She hit the button and heard bolts slide home. Marcus laughed on the other side. You think that stops me? Something mechanical whirred. The door's lock sparked. I have about 3 minutes before Moretti's men regroup, Marcus called out conversationally. So let's make this quick. Open the door and come with me quietly, or I blow through it and drag you out. Your choice. Vivian's hands shook so badly she could barely work the panic room's intercom. Luca! Static crackled. Vivian, where are you? His voice was ragged with fear and fury. Panic room, 3rd floor. He's here. Marcus is here. Hold on, I'm coming. You have 2 minutes, Marcus sing-songed. Maybe less if my toys work better than expected. The door started smoking. Whatever he was using on the locks was cutting through. Vivian looked around the panic room desperately. Reinforced walls. No windows. No exits except the door Marcus was currently breaking through. Security monitors showing the estate being torn apart. Communications panel. First aid kit. And a gun. Secured in a wall mount behind glass. Small caliber. Maybe 6 shots. Instructions stenciled below. Break glass in emergency. Disqualified. She grabbed a chair, smashed the glass, and pulled out the weapon. It felt too heavy and too light at the same time. She'd never fired a gun in her life, never even held one. But she was done running. The door locks gave out with a groan of tortured metal. Marcus pushed through, weapon raised. Vivian fired first. The gun kicked harder than expected. Her shot went wide, hitting the door frame. Marcus didn't even flinch. He walked into the room like he had all the time in the world. Nice try. He aimed his gun at her head. But playtime's over. You're coming with... The second shot caught him in the shoulder. Marcus staggered, more surprised than hurt. Blood bloomed across his tactical vest. His expression shifted from amusement to genuine rage. You actually shot me. Vivian steadied the gun with both hands. Get out. Or what? You'll miss again? He started forward. She fired 3 more times. 1 shot went wild. 1 hit his vest. The third caught him in the thigh. Marcus went down hard. His own weapon skittered across the floor. Blood poured from his leg in a way that looked very, very bad. You... He tried to stand, failed. You actually... Luca appeared in the doorway. He wasn't in his wheelchair. He was standing, braces locked around his legs, one hand gripping the door frame for balance, the other holding a gun that looked big enough to take down bears. His face was carved from pure murder. Get away from my wife. Marcus looked up at Luca standing on his own 2 feet, and something like fear finally entered his dead eyes. You can't. You're paralyzed. I'm motivated. Luca took 1 agonizing step forward, then another. His legs shook with effort, but held. Now, last chance, tell me who sent you and I'll let you bleed out instead of doing it myself. Go to hell. Luca's gun fired once. The shot took Marcus in the chest, center mass, dropping him like a puppet with cut strings. Silence crashed down. Luca swayed, his legs finally giving out. Vivian dropped her gun and caught him before he fell. They collapsed together on the panic room floor, her covered in blood from a dozen scrapes, him barely conscious from pushing his body past its limits. You stood up, she whispered. Had to. His eyes struggled to focus. Couldn't let him take you. Footsteps pounded in the hallway. Luca's security team poured through the door, weapons raised, assessing the carnage. Secure the grounds, Luca ordered, his voice barely audible. Find every single hostile. I want answers. Boss, you need a hospital. I said secure the fucking grounds. The men scattered. Vivian and Luca stayed on the floor, wrapped in each other while sirens approached, and the estate burned, and reality set in with brutal clarity. Someone had just tried to kill them both. Someone with enough resources to breach Moretti estate security. Someone who wanted them dead badly enough to sacrifice dozens of men in the attempt. And as Vivian stared at Marcus Volkov's body leaking blood across expensive carpet, one terrifying truth crystallized. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The estate looked like a war zone in the morning light. Bullet holes cratered walls, blood-stained marble floors, shattered glass crunched under boots as Luca's men swept through every room looking for evidence the attackers left behind. The official count was brutal. 14 hostiles dead, 3 captured alive. On Luca's side, 5 guards killed, 8 wounded, and 1 panic room door that would never lock again. Vivian sat in the master bedroom, wrapped in a blanket despite the room being warm. She couldn't stop shaking. Couldn't stop seeing Marcus Volkov's face right before she pulled the trigger. Couldn't stop feeling the gun's kick against her palms. She'd killed someone. Maybe. The shot to his thigh had been bad, but Luca's bullet to the chest was what dropped him. Did that make her less guilty? More? The math didn't work in her head anymore. Luca was 3 rooms away getting examined by his private doctor. The braces that let him stand had torn something in his back. Internal bleeding, possibly permanent nerve damage. The doctor's voice had been grim when explaining the risks of pushing his body that far, but he'd done it anyway. For her. Irina appeared in the doorway carrying tea Vivian wouldn't drink. You should rest. I can't. Then at least change clothes. The older woman's gaze swept over Vivian's blood-stained dress. Sitting in that won't help. Vivian looked down. The blue fabric was ruined. Marcus's blood mixed with her own from when she'd hit the landing. She peeled it off mechanically and let Irina help her into soft pants and a sweater. The normalcy of the action felt obscene. "Is he okay?" Vivian asked. "Luca? The doctor is still working." Irina's expression stayed neutral, but her hands trembled slightly, arranging the tea service. "He shouldn't have stood up. His body wasn't ready. He saved my life and nearly destroyed what progress he'd made." Not angry, just tired. "Mr. Moretti has a habit of sacrificing himself for others. It's going to kill him one day." The words settled like stones in Vivian's stomach. An hour later, Luca's head of security, a massive man named Torres, who looked like he'd been carved from granite, knocked on the door. "Mrs. Moretti, we need to talk." She followed him to Luca's office. The room was full of men in dark suits going through files and laptops. Crime scene investigators without badges, the kind of cleanup crew that operated outside legal channels. Luca sat behind his desk in the wheelchair, face gray with pain, but eyes sharp as ever. Fresh bandages wrapped his torso. An IV drip fed medication into his arm. "You should be in bed," Vivian said. "I will be. After this." He gestured to Torres. "Tell her." Torres pulled out a tablet and set it on the desk facing Vivian. "We interrogated the 3 survivors. Took some convincing, but they talked. The attack wasn't random." "I know that. Marcus wanted revenge. Marcus was just the weapon." Torres tapped the screen, pulling up photos. "Someone hired him, paid him $2 million plus military-grade equipment to breach our security and either kill you both or take you hostage." Vivian's blood ran cold. "Who?" Torres hesitated, glancing at Luca. "Show her," Luca said quietly. The tablet screen changed. Bank records, wire transfers, shell companies traced back through layers of corporate obfuscation. And at the center of it all, one name that made Vivian's entire world tilt sideways: Richard Hale, her father. "No." The word came out barely above a whisper. "That's not... He wouldn't... The money came from accounts he controls," Torres continued, his voice professionally neutral. 3 separate transfers over the past 6 weeks, each one routed through offshore companies, but the trail leads back to him. Vivian stared at the evidence, at her father's name appearing over and over in financial documents that outlined conspiracy and murder. "This is a mistake. Someone's framing him." "Vivian," Luca started. "No!" She slammed her hand on the desk, hard enough to make the tablet jump. "My father's a gambler and a coward, but he's not a killer. He wouldn't try to have me murdered." "He thought we'd both die," Luca said quietly. "You and me. Then the marriage contract would be void, and he'd inherit your portion of my estate through survivor clauses in the agreement." "What survivor clauses?" "The ones he insisted on when signing the contract." Luca's jaw tightened. "If you died while married to me, and I died without other heirs, your family would receive $20 million. I thought it was standard lawyer paranoia. Turns out it was premeditated planning." The room spun. Vivian grabbed the edge of the desk to stay upright. "You're telling me my father signed a contract that paid him if I died? Not just if you died. If we both died." Torres pulled up more documents. "The timing matters. If you divorced or survived past the 6-month mark, the clause was void. He needed you both dead within the contract period to collect." "This is insane." "It's meticulous." Luca's voice stayed flat, drained of emotion. "Your father's smarter than he looks. He set this up before the wedding even happened. Probably why he agreed to the marriage so easily. He was already planning to cash in on our deaths." Vivian's legs gave out. She collapsed into the chair across from Luca's desk. "He sold me to you knowing someone would try to kill me." "He sold you to me so someone would try to kill you. There's a difference." Jesus Christ. She pressed her hands to her face, trying to force her brain to process information that didn't make sense. Her father, the man who'd held her as a child, who'd cried at her mother's funeral, who'd called her princess, had tried to have her murdered for money. "Where is he now?" The question came out hollow. "That's the problem." Torres exchanged another look with Luca. "He disappeared 2 days ago. Emptied his apartment, closed his bank accounts, vanished. We've got people looking, but he had a head start. He knew the attack was coming. He knew when Marcus would move, probably had a timeline. Luca rolled his chair closer to Vivian. I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. She laughed, came out broken and slightly unhinged. What I wanted to hear? My father tried to have me killed for $20 million. There's no version of that I wanted to hear. Vivian, don't. She stood up fast enough to make the chair scrape backward. I need air. She walked out before anyone could stop her. Through hallways still being cleaned of blood, past guards who nodded with respect she didn't deserve. Out to the gardens where grass sparkled with morning dew and everything looked peaceful despite the violence that had torn through less than 12 hours ago. Vivian made it to the fountain before she threw up. Everything she'd believed about her father, every excuse she'd made, every time she'd defended him, every pathetic hope that he'd change, all of it was lies. He wasn't a broken man making bad choices. He was a murderer who'd sold his daughter as bait. And the worst part? Some small, stupid piece of her still loved him. She stayed there for an hour, sitting on the fountain's edge while her mind tried to rebuild itself around this new truth. Eventually, Luca found her. He wheeled through the gardens slowly, clearly in pain, but refusing to show it. When he reached the fountain, he didn't speak, just sat there in silence while birds sang and the city woke up beyond the estate's walls. I keep thinking about moments, Vivian said finally. When I was 7, he took me to the zoo. We spent the whole day there. He bought me cotton candy and let me ride the carousel 6 times. I thought he was the best father in the world. She wiped her eyes. That memory's probably fake too. He probably gambled half the day away, and I just remember the good parts. Maybe. Or maybe he was a good father once and something broke inside him. Luca's voice was careful. People aren't usually all good or all bad. They're complicated. Don't defend him. I'm not. I'm just saying you're allowed to mourn who he used to be even if you hate who he became. Vivian turned to look at him. Really look at him. The pain lines around his mouth. The exhaustion in his eyes. The way he held himself like every breath hurt. You should be in bed. Probably. Why aren't you? Because my wife is sitting alone in a garden after finding out her father tried to kill her. Bed can wait. He reached out, caught her hand. I'm sorry this happened. Sorry I didn't see it coming. How could you? I didn't see it and I've known him my whole life. The bitterness tasted like copper. What happens now? We find him. We make sure he can't hurt you again. And then, Luca paused. Then you decide what justice looks like. What does that mean? It means he's your father, so you get to choose what happens to him when we catch him. His grip tightened slightly. Prison, exile, or something permanent, your call. The weight of that decision was crushing. Vivian pulled her hand away and stood up, needing to move, needing to do something other than sit still with the enormity of it all. I need to know why, she said. Before anything else happens, I need to hear him explain it. Why he did this. Why I wasn't worth more than $20 million. You're worth more than all the money in the world. Then why didn't he see that? Luca had no answer. Neither did she. They found Richard Hale 3 days later. Not because he was sloppy, because he got greedy. He'd withdrawn $500,000 in cash from a safety deposit box in Milwaukee, and one of Luca's contacts spotted the transaction. By the time Torres and his team arrived, Richard was already gone. But he'd left traces. Security footage. A rental car agreement. A trail leading north toward the Canadian border. He's running, Torres explained during the briefing. Probably has contacts in Toronto who can help him disappear. We have maybe 18 hours before he crosses and becomes exponentially harder to track. Then we move now. Luca's voice was steel wrapped in ice. I want him alive. Vivian gets to talk to him first. Boss, bringing her along isn't negotiable. She comes, she's protected, but she deserves to face him. Vivian sat in the corner of Luca's office, listening to them plan her father's capture like it was a military operation. Part of her wanted to object, wanted to say this was too dangerous, too reckless. But the rest of her, the part that had shot Marcus Volkov and held a bleeding Mafia Boss on a panic room floor, that part wanted answers. They left that afternoon. SUV convoy heading north through Wisconsin farmland, while Vivian sat in the back seat with Luca beside her and enough armed guards to start a small war. The painkillers made Luca's eyes glassy, but his mind stayed sharp. "When we find him," Luca said quietly, "you stay back until we secure the situation. No arguments." "Fine. I'm serious, Vivian. Your father's already proven he'll kill you for money. I'm not giving him another chance." I said fine. She stared out the window at cornfields blurring past. "Do you think he feels anything? Guilt? Regret? Or is it just the money?" "I don't know. Men who gamble everything away stop feeling things normally. The addiction rewires their brain." A pause. "But maybe part of him still loves you. Maybe that's why he disappeared instead of staying to watch you die." "That's not love." "No, it's cowardice. But sometimes cowardice looks like mercy from certain angles." They found Richard Hale in a motel 6 miles from the Canadian border, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. Torres's men surrounded the building while Vivian and Luca waited in the SUV. "Room 12, Torres said through the radio. "He's alone. No weapons visible. We can breach on your order." Luca looked at Vivian. "Last chance to stay here." "Not happening." "Then stay behind me." They moved through the motel's parking lot like a military unit. Torres and 4 guards first, then Luca's wheelchair rolling across cracked asphalt, then Vivian surrounded by 2 more guards. The door to room 12 was thin, cheap. Torres didn't even need tools, he just kicked it off the hinges. Richard Hale sat on the bed counting cash. Stacks of bills surrounded him like a paper fortress. When the door exploded inward, he jumped up with wild eyes and hands raised. "Don't shoot! I'm not armed, I'm—" He stopped when he saw Vivian. "Oh God! Baby, I can explain, Ashok." "Don't call me that." Vivian's voice came out cold enough to freeze. "You lost the right to call me anything." Richard's face crumpled. He looked smaller than she remembered. Older. Gray stubble covered his jaw. His clothes were wrinkled. Dark circles carved crescents under bloodshot eyes. "You weren't supposed to survive," he whispered. The words hit like a physical blow. "Jesus Christ, Dad." Vivian stepped into the room while Torres and the guards secured the perimeter. "You're not even going to try to deny it?" "What's the point? You're here. You know. Moretti probably has evidence. I'm done." He sank back onto the bed, shoulders slumping. "I'm so tired, Vivian, so goddamn tired. You tried to have me killed. I tried to fix everything. There's a difference. How is murdering your daughter fixing anything?" "Because I owed people." Richard's voice cracked. "Not just the Calabrese family. Other people. Worse people. The kind who don't just kill you, they make you watch everyone you love die first. I was out of options." "So you sold me to Luca and hired someone to kill us both." Vivian's hands clenched into fists. "That was your solution." "It was the only solution. If you both died, I'd get enough money to pay everyone off and disappear. Start over somewhere clean." He looked up with wet eyes. "You have to understand, I never wanted this. But the debts kept growing and the people I owed kept getting more violent and I didn't know what else to do." "You could have told me the truth." "And what? Asked you to sacrifice yourself? You wouldn't have agreed. So you made the choice for me. I'm your father. Making hard choices is my job." Vivian laughed. It came out harsh and broken. "You're not my father. Fathers protect their children. You used me as bait." Richard flinched like she'd hit him. "I love you, baby. I know you don't believe that, but I do. Every day. Even when I'm making terrible choices, I love you. Love isn't enough." Luca's voice cut through the room like a blade. He'd rolled his wheelchair to the doorway, backlit by parking lot lights. "Love that doesn't change behavior is just pretty words covering ugly actions." "You don't understand," Richard said desperately. "You've never been drowning in debt, never had people threatening to carve up everyone you care about. I've been drowning in worse than debt." Luca's tone stayed flat. "I lost the woman I loved to a car bomb. Spent 3 years in this chair learning how to exist as half the man I used to be. Watched my empire nearly collapse because rivals thought I was too weak to lead anymore." He rolled closer. "But I never once considered murdering innocent people to fix my problems. That's not desperation. That's moral bankruptcy." Richard's face went pale. "I made a mistake. You made a choice. Multiple choices. You met with Marcus Volkov, transferred money, provided our security schedules, planned the attack timing." Luca's hands gripped the wheelchair's armrests. Those aren't mistakes. That's premeditated murder. I thought she'd die quick, painlessly. Marcus promised. Marcus was a sadist who tortured people for fun. Vivian's voice shook with rage. He put a gun to my head, told me exactly how Sarah Chen died, described the explosion in detail just to watch me break. That's who you hired to kill your daughter. Richard's face crumpled. Tears streamed down his cheeks. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. I know, but it's all I have left. He looked between Vivian and Luca with something like hope dying in his eyes. What happens now? Luca glanced at Vivian. That's up to her. The room went silent except for Richard's ragged breathing and distant highway traffic. Every eye turned to Vivian, waiting. The weight of the decision pressed down like concrete. She could tell Luca to kill him. One word and her father would disappear forever. No trial, no media circus, just gone. She could turn him over to the police, let the justice system handle it. Prison for conspiracy and attempted murder. He'd die behind bars. Or she could walk away. Let him run to Canada with his blood money and live knowing his daughter survived despite his best efforts to kill her. All three options felt wrong. I need to know something first, Vivian said finally. When you signed the marriage contract, when you handed me over to Luca, did you know even then? Were you already planning this? Richard wouldn't meet her eyes. That was answer enough. How long? Her voice broke. How long had you been planning to kill me? 6 months, since the Calabrese family first threatened me. I knew they'd want collateral, and you were all I had left. So I started researching, found out about Moretti's reputation, his needs, the fact that marrying into his world came with significant financial benefits for family members. He wiped his face. I thought if I could get you married to him, then arrange for both your deaths, I could solve everything. The debts, the threats, all of it. While I was still teaching, Vivian's hand shook. While I was still trying to build a normal life. You were already planning my funeral. I didn't want to, but I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. Luca's voice was quiet but lethal. You just chose wrong every single time. Richard looked at him with something like resignation. So what now? You going to kill me? Torture me? Make me disappear? I told you, that's Vivian's decision. Luca rolled backward slightly, giving her space. He's your father. You decide what justice looks like. Vivian stared at the man who'd given her life and then tried to take it away. Part of her wanted him dead, wanted to watch him suffer the way he'd made her suffer. But another part, smaller, weaker, just wanted him gone. Out of her life. Out of her head. A ghost she could finally stop mourning. Take his money, she said finally. Every dollar he withdrew, every account he has access to. Take it all and donate it to the youth centers. Richard's eyes went wide. Vivian, I'm not finished. Her voice hardened. Then you're going to disappear. Not to Canada. Not anywhere you planned. Torres is going to put you somewhere remote. Somewhere you can't gamble, can't scheme. Somewhere you'll spend the rest of your life working manual labor to earn your keep. She stepped closer. And if you ever try to contact me again, if I even hear a rumor you're thinking about me, Luca will find you. And what happened to Marcus Volkov will look like mercy compared to what happens next. Richard's face drained of all color. You can't. I can, and I am. Vivian turned her back on him. Get him out of here. I don't want to see him again. Torres and his men moved in. Richard started crying harder, begging, promising he'd change. But Vivian walked out before she could hear more. Luca followed silently. They sat in the SUV while Torres and the guards processed Richard like cargo. Vivian stared straight ahead, not trusting herself to speak, not trusting herself to feel anything without breaking completely. You did the right thing, Luca said quietly. Did I? Maybe I should have had you kill him. Maybe, but that would have haunted you forever. He reached over, caught her hand. This way. He lives with what he did. That's worse than death for men like him. I don't feel better. You won't, not for a while. Maybe not ever. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. But you'll survive. That's what matters. They drove back to Chicago in silence. Vivian's phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from Irina asking if they were okay. She ignored them all. When they finally pulled through the estate gates, dawn was breaking over the city. Pink and gold light painted the sky like something beautiful existed, despite everything ugly underneath. Vivian went straight to her room and locked the door. She stripped off her clothes and stood under scalding water until her skin turned red. Scrubbing, trying to wash away the feeling of her father's betrayal, trying to make sense of a world where parents killed children for money. She was still in the shower when Luca knocked on the bathroom door. "Go away," she called out. "No." "Luca, I need to be alone." "No, you don't." The door opened. He'd somehow maneuvered his wheelchair across the threshold. "You need someone who understands how betrayal feels, how it carves you hollow and leaves you wondering if you'll ever trust anyone again." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're breaking. And you're allowed to break. But you don't have to do it alone." Something inside Vivian shattered. She turned off the water and stepped out, not bothering to cover herself. Luca didn't look away. Didn't make it sexual or weird, just grabbed a towel and wrapped it around her shoulders. "My father tried to kill me for $20 million, she whispered. "How do I come back from that?" "You don't come back. You build something new from what's left." He pulled her down until she was sitting in his lap, wheelchair groaning under their combined weight. "You survive, you keep breathing, and eventually you find people who love you without conditions." "Like who?" "Like me." The words landed between them like an explosion. Vivian pulled back to stare at him. "What?" "I love you." Luca said it simply, like he was stating a fact instead of admitting something terrifying. "I didn't mean to, didn't plan for it. But somewhere between the contract and the dinners and you refusing to run even when you should have, I fell in love with you." "Luca, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. Needed you to understand that you're not alone in this, that what we have is real, even if it started as a transaction." Vivian's chest felt too small for everything inside it. "My father just tried to murder me. This is the worst possible time for you to tell me you love me." "I know. But if I've learned anything, it's that waiting for the perfect moment means never saying anything at all." He cupped her face with both hands. "So here it is. Imperfect, messy, real. I love you, Vivian, and if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving you can trust someone not to destroy you." She kissed him because words were impossible, because her entire world had collapsed and he was the only steady thing left. They stayed like that, her wrapped in a towel in his lap, him holding her like she was precious, while the sun rose and the city woke up and reality waited outside the bathroom door. Eventually, Vivian pulled back just far enough to whisper, "I love you too. I don't know when it happened, but it did, and that terrifies me more than anything else." "Good. Terror means it matters." "What do we do now?" "Now?" Luca smiled slightly. "Now we figure out how to survive being in love in the middle of a war." The war came for them 2 days later. Vivian was in the library reading when Torres burst through the door with his weapon drawn. "We need to move you now." "What's happening?" "Someone leaked the footage of you shooting Marcus Volkov to the media. It's everywhere, every news channel, every website, video of you standing in the panic room with a gun." His face was grim. "The FBI just issued a warrant for your arrest." The book fell from Vivian's hands. "They're calling it first-degree murder," Torres continued, "claiming you executed a wounded man. They have experts analyzing the video saying Marcus posed no threat when you fired." "That's not what happened. Doesn't matter what actually happened. What matters is what they can prove. And right now, the footage looks bad." He grabbed her arm. "We have maybe 30 minutes before they storm the estate with federal marshals. We need to get you out." Luca appeared in the doorway, his face carved from stone. "No." "Boss, they're coming." "I said no." Luca rolled into the room. "We don't run. We fight this legally." "There's nothing legal about this," Torres practically shouted. "Someone manufactured evidence, edited the footage to make her look guilty. This is a setup." "I know it's a setup." Luca's voice stayed deadly calm. "Which means running makes her look guilty. We stay. We lawyer up. We prove the footage was tampered with. And if we can't prove it, then I make this problem disappear another way." Vivian's mind was still trying to process the information. Who leaked the footage? We don't know yet. Security's been compromised somewhere in our network. Torres looked between them desperately. Please, both of you, let me get you out before this gets worse. It's already worse. Luca pulled out his phone, started dialing. Get our attorneys here immediately, every single one, and find out who leaked that footage. I want names within the hour. Vivian watched him work with mechanical precision, calling lawyers, issuing orders, building a defense strategy while federal agents prepared to storm his home. And somewhere beneath the fear and shock, one truth crystallized with brutal clarity. Her father's betrayal was just the beginning. Someone else wanted her destroyed. Someone with enough power and resources to manipulate evidence and weaponize the FBI. Someone who'd been watching them this entire time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And as Vivian stared at the book lying open on the floor, one name emerged from the chaos of her thoughts. A name Luca had mentioned weeks ago during their first real conversation about enemies and power. Senator Carver. The man Luca had threatened at the Drake Hotel fundraiser. The man who'd warned her she'd end up like Sarah Chen. The man who had every reason to want the Moretti family destroyed. It's Carver, she said suddenly. He's behind this. Luca's hand froze mid-dial. What? The attack, the leaked footage, all of it. The pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. He wants you destroyed, and he's using me to do it. Luca and Torres exchanged a look. If that's true, Torres said slowly, then we're not just fighting a legal battle. We're fighting someone with federal protection and unlimited resources. Then we fight smarter. Luca's eyes went cold. Because I'm done playing defense. It's time Senator Carver learned what happens when you threaten my family. The word family hit Vivian like lightning. Not wife, not contract, family. And as sirens approached in the distance and reality closed in from all sides, Vivian made a choice that would change everything. She was done being the victim. Done being the frightened girl who let powerful men dictate her fate. If they wanted a war, she'd give them one, even if it destroyed her in the process. The federal marshals arrived exactly 28 minutes later with enough firepower to siege a fortress. Black SUVs lined the estate's driveway while helicopters circled overhead like vultures waiting for death. Vivian watched from the library window as men in tactical gear positioned themselves around the perimeter with military precision. They're not taking chances, Torres muttered beside her. That's triple the standard arrest team. Because they know who they're dealing with. Luca sat behind his desk reviewing legal documents his attorney had rushed over minutes earlier. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes burned with barely controlled fury. Senator Carver wants this to look like a legitimate operation. Maximum show of force. The doorbell rang. Not a knock. Not a demand. Just the doorbell like this was a social call instead of an arrest. Torres moved toward the entrance hall, but Luca stopped him with a raised hand. I'll handle this. Get Vivian to the safe room. No. Vivian's voice came out steady despite her racing pulse. If they're here for me, I face them. Running makes me look guilty. Vivian, we agreed. We fight this legally. That starts with me not hiding. She smoothed down her sweater and walked toward the front door before anyone could argue. Her hands shook, but she kept them at her sides where the marshals wouldn't see. The lead marshal was a woman in her 40s with iron gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. Her badge read, Marshal Catherine Reeves. Behind her stood 8 more agents with weapons ready but not raised. Vivian Moretti? Reeves asked, though she obviously knew the answer. Yes. I have a federal warrant for your arrest on charges of first-degree murder. She pulled out handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. She's invoking that right immediately. A voice cut through from behind Vivian. Her attorney, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Chen, who charged $5,000 an hour, appeared beside her. My client will surrender peacefully, but we're formally objecting to this arrest on grounds of evidence tampering and prosecutorial misconduct. Reeves's expression didn't change. Your objections are noted for the record. Mrs. Moretti, please turn around. The cold metal of handcuffs clicked around Vivian's wrists with a finality that made her stomach drop. This was real. This was happening. Federal agents were arresting her for killing a man who'd tried to kidnap her at gunpoint. Luca appeared in the hallway behind them, his wheelchair rolling forward slowly. Every marshal's hand moved toward their weapons. The tension spiked instantly. Easy, Luca said, his voice deadly calm. I'm not here to interfere. Just want to say goodbye to my wife. Reeves hesitated, then nodded. 30 seconds. Luca rolled close enough that only Vivian could hear him whisper. Remember what we talked about. Say nothing, trust Patricia, and know that I'm going to burn down everyone responsible for this. Don't do anything stupid. Too late for that. His hand caught hers briefly. I love you. This isn't over. I love you too. The marshals pulled her away before she could say more. Led her through the mansion she'd started thinking of as home. Past staff who watched with horrified expressions. Past security who looked ready to start a firefight. Out into morning sunlight that felt obscene in its cheerfulness. They put her in an armored SUV that smelled like leather and gun oil. Patricia climbed in beside her while two marshals took the front seats. The convoy pulled out of the estate with helicopters tracking overhead. Don't speak, Patricia said quietly. Don't react to anything they say. They'll try to get you talking during processing. Refuse everything except water and bathroom breaks. What about bail? We'll request it at arraignment, but don't count on it. The prosecution's going to argue you're a flight risk with access to criminal resources. She pulled out a tablet. I've already filed motions to suppress the video evidence as tampered. We have experts lined up to testify about digital manipulation. But Vivian, this is going to get worse before it gets better. How much worse? Senator Carver's office released a statement 30 minutes ago calling you a violent criminal hiding behind wealth and privilege. He's personally lobbying the judge to deny bail. This isn't just a murder trial, it's a political hit job. Vivian stared out the window at Chicago passing by in a blur of steel and glass. Somewhere in this city, Senator Carver sat in his office orchestrating her destruction, using federal law enforcement as his personal weapon, and she was powerless to stop it. The holding facility was exactly as grim as expected. Fluorescent lights that turned skin corpse gray. Concrete walls. The smell of industrial cleaner failing to mask worse odors underneath. They processed her like cargo. Fingerprints, photographs, medical screening, property confiscation. Through it all, Vivian stayed silent. Focused on breathing. On not breaking down where they could see. The cell they put her in was 10 feet by 8 with a metal cot and a toilet that didn't have a seat. The door locked with a sound like a coffin closing. Vivian sat on the cot and stared at nothing while her mind spun in circles. How had it come to this? 6 weeks ago, she was a nobody teaching assistant drowning in her father's debts. Now she was a federal prisoner facing life in prison for defending herself against a hired killer. Time moved strangely. Could have been an hour. Could have been 5. Eventually, a guard appeared and led her to a visitation room where Patricia waited with a stack of legal documents. Arraignments tomorrow morning, the attorney said without preamble. Federal courthouse downtown. Media circus expected. The prosecution's asking for no bail based on severity of charges and your connection to organized crime. I shot a man who was trying to kidnap me. I know, but the video they leaked shows Marcus Volkov wounded and backing away when you fired. Their narrative is that you executed him after he surrendered. Patricia pulled up the footage on her tablet. Look, Vivian watched herself in the panic room. The angle was wrong, positioned to make it look like Marcus was retreating when she pulled the trigger. The editing was subtle but effective. It transformed self-defense into murder. That's not what happened. I know, but this is what a jury will see if we can't prove it's been manipulated. Patricia swiped to another document. The good news is our forensics team found evidence of digital alteration, frame rate inconsistencies, compression artifacts that shouldn't exist. We can prove tampering. And the bad news? Proving tampering doesn't automatically prove innocence. We still need to establish what actually happened, which means putting you on the stand and letting the prosecution cross-examine you about shooting a man 5 times. Vivian's stomach turned over. What does Lucas say? That he'll kill everyone responsible. Patricia's expression stayed neutral. Which is why I need you to tell him to stay out of this. Any hint that he's interfering gives the prosecution ammunition to paint you as part of a criminal conspiracy. He won't listen. Then make him listen. Because if Luca Moretti does something stupid, it won't just destroy him, it'll destroy you too. That night in the cell, Vivian lay awake staring at the ceiling while her mind replayed everything. Her father's betrayal. Marcus pointing a gun at her chest. Luca standing on ruined legs to protect her. Senator Carver's smug face at the Drake Hotel, promising she'd end up like Sarah Chen. He'd orchestrated all of this, used her father's desperation to set up the attack, leaked the footage to law enforcement, turned her self-defense into a federal case, all to hurt Luca by destroying the woman he loved. And it was working. Vivian must have finally slept because she woke to a guard banging on the cell door. Arraignment in 2 hours. Get ready. They transported her to the courthouse in an armored van with Patricia beside her reviewing strategy. The media presence was insane. News trucks lined every street, cameras tracking their approach, helicopters overhead. Through the van's small window, Vivian saw protesters. Some held signs supporting her. Others called her a murderer. All of them screamed loud enough to hear through bulletproof glass. The courthouse was a fortress of marble and security. They led her through underground tunnels to avoid the crowds, up elevators, through hallways lined with federal agents, into a courtroom that smelled like old wood and older fear. The judge was a severe woman in her 60s named Richardson, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. The prosecution table held 3 attorneys in expensive suits and Senator Carver sitting in the gallery's front row, watching with barely concealed satisfaction. Luca sat across the aisle in his wheelchair, surrounded by his own attorneys and security. Their eyes met, and he mouthed 2 words: "Stay strong." Judge Richardson banged her gavel. "We're here for arraignment in United States versus Moretti. Defendant, please rise." Vivian stood on shaking legs while Patricia rose beside her. "Mrs. Moretti, you're charged with first-degree murder in the death of Marcus Volkov. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor." Her voice came out steadier than expected. "The prosecution requests remand without bail," one of the suited attorneys said immediately. "The defendant has extensive connections to organized crime, unlimited financial resources, and has already demonstrated willingness to use lethal force. She poses an extreme flight risk." Patricia stepped forward. "Your Honor, my client acted in clear self-defense against a home invasion by armed mercenaries. The evidence the prosecution relies on has been digitally manipulated, which we're prepared to prove. Mrs. Moretti has no criminal record, strong ties to the community, and fully intends to fight these baseless charges. The defendant is married to one of Chicago's most notorious crime figures," the prosecutor shot back. "A man with the resources to hide her anywhere in the world. There's no bail amount that adequately addresses that risk." Judge Richardson studied the documents in front of her with an expression that gave nothing away. "I've reviewed the evidence packet. The video in question does appear to show the defendant firing at a wounded man. Your Honor, that footage has been edited. I'm aware of your claims, Ms. Chen, but until you prove tampering in court, I have to consider the evidence as presented." Richardson's gaze fixed on Vivian. "Mrs. Moretti, this court takes allegations of evidence tampering seriously. However, it also takes charges of first-degree murder seriously. I'm setting bail at $10 million cash, with electronic monitoring and surrender of all passports." The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled. Senator Carver's face twisted with rage. Patricia argued for lower bail while the prosecution demanded remand. Through it all, Vivian stood frozen, trying to process that she was one step closer to freedom. $10 million cash, Judge Richardson repeated, banging her gavel. "Next hearing in 2 weeks. Defendant is remanded to custody until bail is posted. We're adjourned." Marshals moved to take Vivian back to holding, but Luca's voice cut through the chaos. "The money's ready. I'm posting bail now." Every eye turned to him. The prosecution attorney looked furious. "Your Honor, this proves exactly what we've been saying. Mr. Moretti is within his legal rights to post bail for his wife," Richardson said coldly. "Unless you're suggesting we deny bail based on who pays for it." The prosecutor's mouth snapped shut. It took 3 hours to process everything. Paperwork, electronic monitoring bracelet locked around her ankle, conditions of release read aloud by a clerk who sounded bored. Then finally, Patricia led her out through a side exit where Luca waited with Torres and enough security to protect a president. Vivian collapsed into his arms the moment she cleared the door. He held her like she might disappear if he loosened his grip. "I've got you," he whispered. "You're safe now." "I'm really not safe enough." He pulled back to look at her. Dark circles carved crescents under his eyes. His jaw was tight with stress. "We're going somewhere secure, somewhere Carver can't reach, and then we're going to destroy him." They drove to a downtown high-rise that belonged to one of Luca's front companies. The penthouse apartment had been converted into a fortress. Bulletproof windows, reinforced doors, security monitors covering every approach. Irina had already stocked the kitchen. Torres posted guards on every floor. Vivian stood in the living room feeling disconnected from her body. Everything that happened in the past 48 hours felt surreal, like she'd slipped into an alternate reality where her life stopped making sense. "You need sleep," Luca said, rolling up beside her. "I need answers." She turned to face him. "You said we'd destroy Carver. How?" "Leave that to me." "No." Her voice hardened. "I'm done being protected. Done sitting on the sidelines while you handle everything. If we're taking down a U.S. senator, I want to know the plan." Luca studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Torres, bring the files." They spent the next 4 hours going through everything Luca's people had gathered on Senator James Carver. Financial records, communications logs, travel itineraries, connection maps showing his ties to various criminal enterprises. It was a web of corruption that would have impressed even hardened investigators. "Carver's been on the take for 15 years, Luca explained, pointing to highlighted transactions. Russian mob, Chinese triads, Mexican cartels. He provides political protection, and they fund his campaigns through shell companies. Standard political corruption, except he's gotten sloppy lately." "How sloppy?" "Sloppy enough that we can prove it." Torres pulled up another document. "He's been funneling campaign contributions directly into personal accounts. Millions of dollars. If this went public, he'd be facing federal charges himself." "So we leak it." "Not yet." Luca's eyes were cold. "Leaking financial crimes gets him investigated. Maybe convicted years from now. But it doesn't clear your name, and it doesn't stop him from coming after us again." "Then what do? We make him confess." Luca leaned back in his wheelchair. "We make him admit on record that he manufactured evidence, used federal law enforcement as a weapon, and orchestrated your arrest as political revenge. Once we have that confession, we leak everything. His crimes, his admission, all of it." Vivian's pulse quickened. "How do we force a confession from a U.S. senator?" "By giving him what he wants most." A dangerous smile touched Luca's lips. "Me, dead. Which means faking my death convincingly enough that Carver believes he's won." The room went silent. "That's insane," Patricia said from where she'd been reviewing legal briefs. "If you fake your death, every criminal organization in Chicago will smell blood. They'll move on your territory within hours. Let them. Torres and my captains can hold things together for a few days." Luca's gaze stayed locked on Vivian. "Once Carver thinks I'm dead, he'll get arrogant, sloppy. He'll want to gloat, and when he does, we record everything." "This is too dangerous," Vivian said. "If something goes wrong, then we're no worse off than we are now. You're facing life in prison. I'm watching the woman I love get destroyed by a corrupt politician. We're already in the danger zone." He reached out and caught her hand. "But if this works, we get everything. Your freedom, Carver's destruction, and maybe some peace. And if it doesn't work? Then I'm really dead and you find a way to survive without me." His grip tightened. "But I'm betting on it working. They planned through the night, every detail, every contingency, the staged assassination, the public funeral, the surveillance operation that would capture Carver's confession. It was audacious and reckless and probably suicidal. It was also their only option." 3 days later, Luca Moretti was shot outside the federal courthouse. Vivian watched it happen from 50 feet away, knowing it was staged, but still feeling her heart stop when the shots rang out. Luca's wheelchair jerked. Blood, fake blood, theatrical blood, bloomed across his chest. He slumped forward. Torres and the security team swarmed around him screaming for medics while civilians scattered in panic. Vivian screamed too because that part needed to be real. The cameras had to see her reaction, had to believe she was watching her husband die. They rushed him into an ambulance with sirens wailing. Vivian tried to follow, but marshals held her back. She was still on electronic monitoring, still bound by release conditions. She watched the ambulance disappear into traffic while reporters swarmed asking for comments she couldn't give. Patricia appeared at her elbow. "Stay in character. You're devastated, in shock. Don't say anything except that you need to be with your husband." The news broke within minutes. Every channel, every website, every radio station. Chicago Mafia Boss. Luca Moretti shot outside courthouse. Moretti fighting for life after assassination attempt, sources. Suspected retaliation for wife's murder charges. The city exploded. Rival crime families started positioning for control of Moretti territory. Police went on high alert, expecting gang warfare. Federal prosecutors released statements about organized crime violence. And through it all, Senator Carver said nothing publicly. But privately, Torres's surveillance teams watching his office reported celebrations. Luca was actually in a safe house on the south side, recovering from the tranquilizer dart they'd used to simulate death. The blood had been theatrical effects rigged by a Hollywood specialist Torres knew from his military days. The whole performance had cost $200,000 and required bribing half the ambulance crew. But it had worked. Carver believed Luca was dying. Vivian spent 48 hours in the penthouse apartment playing the devastated widow, while Torres coordinated surveillance. Every news interview she gave was carefully scripted. Enough grief to look real, enough anger to seem vengeful, enough vulnerability to make Carver believe she was broken. The call came on the third night. "Senator Carver wants to meet with you," Patricia said, her voice carefully neutral over the phone. "He claims he has information about your husband's shooting." Vivian's pulse spiked. "When?" "Tomorrow evening. His private office. He's requesting no attorneys present. Says it's off the record." "That's a trap." "Obviously, which is why you'll be wearing a wire and Torres will have a team positioned nearby." Patricia paused. "This is it, Vivian. Our chance to get the confession. Are you ready?" Was she ready? Ready to sit across from the man who'd orchestrated her destruction? Ready to fake composure while he gloated about murdering her husband? Ready to gamble everything on one conversation? "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." The next evening, Vivian arrived at the senator's office wearing a simple black dress and the kind of grief that didn't need acting. Torres had wired her with equipment so sophisticated it was invisible. An audio recorder built into her necklace, a panic button hidden in her watch, and enough backup stationed within 1 minute's response time to start a small war. Carver's office was exactly what she expected. Wood paneling, leather furniture, walls covered with photos of him shaking hands with presidents and celebrities. He sat behind a desk that probably cost more than most people's cars, looking relaxed in an expensive suit with his silver hair perfectly styled. "Mrs. Moretti," he said, standing as she entered. "Thank you for coming. I know this must be a difficult time. You said you had information about my husband's shooting. Please sit." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "Just information." Carver's smile was sympathetic in a way that made her skin crawl. "Of course. I'll be direct. I've been working with federal law enforcement on the Moretti organized crime investigation for several years now. We believe the shooting was retaliation from one of the rival families, likely the Calabrese Syndicate or the Russian operations." "That's not information, that's speculation." "True. But what isn't speculation is this. Your husband was a dangerous criminal, a man responsible for countless deaths and incalculable damage to this city. His shooting, while tragic for you personally, removes a cancer from Chicago's core." Vivian's hands clenched in her lap. "You think he deserved to be killed, to be... I think actions have consequences. Your husband built an empire on violence. Violence was always going to end him." Carver leaned forward. "But you, Mrs. Moretti, you have a chance to walk away from all this. The murder charges against you could be reduced or even dropped if you cooperate with our investigation into your husband's criminal operations." "You want me to testify against him?" "I want you to tell the truth about what you witnessed. The illegal activities, the violence, all of it." His eyes gleamed. "In exchange, I can make your legal problems disappear. Full immunity, witness protection, if you want it. A chance to start over clean." This was it. The moment everything hinged on. Vivian took a slow breath and said the words that would either save or destroy them. "You orchestrated this whole thing, didn't you? The attack on the estate, the edited footage, my arrest, even my husband's shooting." She held his gaze. "You've been planning this for months." Carver's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth. You wanted Luca destroyed, and you used me to do it." Her voice stayed steady. "The question is why? What did he do to you that was worth corrupting federal law enforcement? Your husband was a criminal. So are you. Vivian leaned forward. The difference is Luca never pretended to be something else. But you? You hide behind political office while taking money from the same criminals you claim to fight. That makes you worse than him. At least he was honest about what he was. Carver's smile turned cold. You're upset, grieving, not thinking clearly. I'm thinking very clearly. Probably for the first time in months. She stood up. You wanted Luca dead because he knew too much about your corruption, about the bribes and the illegal campaign contributions and all the ways you've been selling out this city for 15 years. He was a threat to your career, so you decided to eliminate him. Careful, Mrs. Moretti. Accusations like that without evidence are called slander. They're only slander if they're false. Vivian walked toward the door. And we both know everything I just said is true. Even if it were... Carver stood, his composure finally cracking. Even if any of that were accurate, what exactly do you think you can do about it? You're facing murder charges. Your husband is dead or dying. Your father abandoned you. You have no power here. Maybe not, but at least I'm not a coward hiding behind a badge. She reached for the door handle. You stupid girl! Carver's voice turned vicious. You really think I'm going to let you walk out of here and cause problems? Your husband's death was supposed to be the end of this. But if you want to join him, that can be arranged. Vivian's hand froze on the handle. Are you threatening me? I'm stating facts. Marcus Volkov wasn't the only operator I have access to. There are a dozen men I could hire tomorrow who'd make your death look like suicide. Tragic widow overcome with grief. Couldn't live without her criminal husband. He walked around the desk toward her. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to cooperate with the investigation. You're going to testify that your husband was violent and dangerous. And you're going to publicly support my re-election campaign as a reformed woman who escaped organized crime. And if I refuse, then you'll be dead within a week, and I'll make sure it's painful. He stepped closer. I've destroyed better people than you, Mrs. Moretti. Your husband was just the latest. Don't make the mistake of thinking you're any different. Vivian's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her ribs, but she forced herself to stay calm, to stay in character. You admit it then. You orchestrated my husband's shooting. I orchestrated his execution, Carver smiled, along with everything else. The attack on your estate using your father's debts as leverage, the edited footage of you killing Marcus, your arrest, all of it. I've been planning this operation for 2 years, and you were simply collateral damage that became useful. Why? Why go through all this trouble? Because Luca Moretti knew too much about my financial arrangements. He had evidence that could have ended my career, so I ended him first. Carver's voice was full of self-satisfaction. And now he's dead. You're broken, and I get to be the senator who cleaned up Chicago's organized crime problem. Everybody wins. Well, except you and your husband. The confession was complete. Every word captured on the recorder hidden in Vivian's necklace. Every admission preserved for federal prosecutors. It was everything they needed. Now she just had to survive the next 60 seconds. You're right, Vivian said quietly. I am just collateral damage. A stupid girl who got caught up in things she didn't understand. She opened the door. But at least I'm not stupid enough to confess to multiple federal crimes while being recorded. Carver's face drained of all color. What? Every word you just said was captured on audio. Federal prosecutors will have the recording within the hour, along with all the evidence of your financial crimes, your connections to organized crime, and your conspiracy to commit murder. She smiled. Congratulations, Senator. You just destroyed yourself. Carver lunged at her, but Vivian was already through the door. Torres and 4 agents burst into the hallway with weapons drawn. More agents poured through Carver's office entrance from a stairwell. Within seconds, the senator was surrounded by federal law enforcement. James Carver, one of the agents said, pulling out handcuffs. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, corruption, and about 15 other charges. You have the right to remain silent. Carver's face twisted with rage as they cuffed him. This won't stick. I have lawyers. I have connections. You can't do this to me. We already did. Torres appeared beside Vivian. And just so you know, Luca Moretti isn't dead. He's very much alive and extremely interested in watching you rot in federal prison." The look on Carver's face was almost worth everything Vivian had been through. Almost. They led him away still screaming about lawyers and political immunity. Vivian sagged against the hallway wall while adrenaline drained from her system like water from a broken pipe. Her hands shook. Her legs felt like rubber. But it was over. They'd won. Patricia appeared with a phone pressed to her ear. "Federal prosecutor just confirmed, based on the recording and supporting evidence, they're dropping all charges against you. Immediately. You're free." Vivian started crying. Couldn't help it. Weeks of terror and stress and fear finally breaking through. Torres awkwardly patted her shoulder while Patricia handled the legal coordination. "Where's Luca?" Vivian asked when she could finally speak. "Safe house, still recovering from the tranquilizer, but alive and well." Torres pulled out his phone. "Want me to call him?" "No, I want to see him." They drove through Chicago while the sun set and the city transformed into something beautiful again. News was already breaking. Senator Carver arrested, charges against Vivian Moretti dropped, corruption scandal at the highest levels of government. The media would feast on this for months. But Vivian didn't care about any of that. She cared about the man waiting for her in a Southside safe house who'd risked everything to save her. Luca was awake when she arrived, sitting up in bed looking pale but alive. His eyes went wide when she walked through the door. "You did it," he said. "We did it." Vivian crossed the room and crawled into bed beside him, careful of his injuries. "It's over. Really over. How do you feel?" "Like I survived something I shouldn't have." She pressed her face against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Like I'm finally free." Luca's arms wrapped around her. "I love you. I love you too." They stayed like that, two broken people who'd fought their way through hell together, while the city celebrated beyond the windows and reality slowly returned to something resembling normal. It should have been the ending. But deep down, Vivian knew it was just another beginning, because surviving wasn't the same as healing, and healing was going to take everything they had left. Senator James Carver's trial lasted 6 weeks and destroyed what remained of his political empire with surgical precision. Every corrupt deal, every bribe, every connection to organized crime laid bare in federal court, while cameras broadcast his humiliation to the world. The jury took 4 hours to convict him on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 32 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Vivian watched from the gallery as marshals led him away in chains. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, just another corrupt politician who'd finally faced consequences. When his eyes found hers in the courtroom, she didn't look away, didn't gloat, just watched him disappear through the doors, knowing she'd never have to think about him again. Luca sat beside her in his wheelchair, his hand warm in hers. The tranquilizer and the stress had set his recovery back months, but he was alive. They both were. That was what mattered. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, asking for statements. Patricia handled them with professional efficiency while Torres and security cleared a path to the waiting SUV. The questions came fast and overlapping. How did it feel to be vindicated? Would she sue for wrongful arrest? What was next for the Moretti family? Vivian ignored all of it, climbed into the vehicle beside Luca and let the door close on the noise. They rode back to the estate in silence while Chicago passed by the windows like a city that had forgotten how to hurt them. The mansion had been repaired in the weeks since the attack. New windows, fresh paint, security upgraded to levels that would make Fort Knox jealous. But it still felt different somehow, like a place where ghosts lived in the corners, reminding them of everything they'd survived. Irina had prepared lunch, something light and comforting that tasted like home, if home was a concept either of them fully understood anymore. They ate in the conservatory, surrounded by plants that had somehow thrived despite the violence that had torn through the estate. "What are you thinking?" Luca asked, setting down his fork. "That I don't know who I am anymore." Vivian stared at her plate. 6 months ago, I was a teaching assistant drowning in debt. Now I'm a mafia wife who shot a man and helped take down a U.S. senator. Those two people don't feel like the same person. They're not. You changed. We both did. He reached across the table to catch her hand. But that doesn't mean the old version of you is gone. It just means you added layers. Dark layers. Survival layers. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. You did what you had to do to stay alive. That's not darkness. That's strength. I killed someone, Luca. Maybe not the final shot, but I wounded him. I pointed a gun at another human being and pulled the trigger. The weight of it pressed down like concrete. How do I come back from that? You don't come back. You move forward. Luca's voice stayed gentle. I've killed more people than I can count. Each one changed me in ways I'm still discovering. But I learned something important. Guilt means you still have a conscience. It means you're not a monster. Monsters don't feel bad about what they do. Do you feel bad? Every day. But I also know most of those deaths were necessary. People who would have killed innocents if I hadn't stopped them. Marcus Volkov was one of those people. He was a torturer and a murderer who'd killed dozens before you shot him. The world's better without him in it. That doesn't make it easier. No, it just makes it bearable. He squeezed her hand. Give it time. The guilt gets quieter. Never goes away completely, but it stops screaming so loud. They finished lunch in comfortable silence. Afterward, Luca had meetings with his captains about territory disputes that had erupted during his staged death. Vivian wandered the mansion feeling unmoored. The electronic monitoring bracelet was gone. The charges dropped. She was legally free to go anywhere, do anything, but she had no idea what she wanted to do. She found herself in the library staring at the books that had kept her sane during those early weeks of the marriage, running her fingers along spines, remembering the woman who'd hidden in here reading to escape reality. That woman felt like a stranger now. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm in the city. Can we talk? Dad. Vivian's blood went cold. Her father. The man Torres had supposedly exiled to manual labor in some remote location. The man who'd tried to have her murdered. Her finger hovered over the delete button. Then she called Torres instead. How did my father get my number? Her voice came out harder than intended. Shit, he wasn't supposed to... Hold on. Torres's keyboard clicked in the background. He's still at the work site in Montana. Has been the whole time. This text came from a Chicago area code. So someone's pretending to be him. Or he paid someone to send it for him. More keyboard sounds. I'm tracking the number now. Give me 10 minutes. Vivian stared at the message. Every instinct screamed this was a trap. But another part, smaller, more pathetic, wondered if maybe her father had changed. If exile and hard work had somehow transformed him into someone capable of genuine remorse. She knew better. Men like Richard Hale didn't change. They just found new ways to hurt people. But she texted back anyway. Where? The response came immediately. Navy Pier, South Dock, 1 hour. Come alone. Absolutely not. Luca's voice came from the doorway. He must have finished his meeting early. That's obviously a setup. I know. Then why are you considering it? Because I need to know if there's anything left worth saving. Vivian turned to face him. My father tried to kill me, sold me like property, destroyed everything I thought I knew about family, but he's still my father, and some stupid part of me needs to hear him explain why. He'll just lie, probably, but at least I'll know I tried. She crossed to where Luca sat in his wheelchair. I'm not going alone. Torres will have a team positioned. You can monitor everything remotely, but I need to do this. Luca studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Fine, but if anything feels wrong, you run. No heroics, no trying to save him if this goes bad. Deal. Torres set up the operation with military precision. Vivian would wear a wire and a GPS tracker embedded in her watch. Snipers positioned on surrounding buildings. Undercover agents scattered through the pier's crowds. Torres himself would be within 30 yards at all times. And Luca would monitor everything from the estate's security room. The hour drive to Navy Pier felt like moving through syrup. Vivian's pulse raced despite knowing she was surrounded by protection. The lake stretched gray and endless beyond the pier's tourist attractions. Crowds milled around eating overpriced food and taking photos, while completely unaware of the trap potentially unfolding. The South Dock was quieter. Fewer people. More shadows. Vivian walked past closed vendor stalls and empty benches until she saw him. Richard Hale looked worse than she remembered. Thinner. Grayer. His clothes hung off him like they belonged to someone bigger. He stood near the railing staring out at the water with hunched shoulders that screamed defeat. Dad? Vivian said quietly. He turned and something cracked in his expression. relief mixed with shame. You came. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. She stopped 10 feet away, maintaining distance. How did you get here? Torres said you were in Montana. I paid someone to smuggle me out. Cost everything I had left, but I needed to see you. His voice broke. Needed to tell you I'm sorry. For everything. For what I did. For the man I became. Sorry doesn't fix this. I know, but it's all I have. Richard took a step closer. Vivian tensed, but he stopped immediately, hands raised. I'm not here to hurt you. Not here to ask for anything except a chance to explain. Explain what? How you tried to have me murdered for money? How you sold me to Luca knowing someone would try to kill us both? Her voice stayed cold. There's no explanation that makes that okay. You're right, there isn't. He sagged against the railing. But maybe I can help you understand how a man gets so broken he destroys the only person he has left to love. Against her better judgment, Vivian gestured for him to talk. Richard's story poured out in disjointed pieces. The gambling addiction that started small and grew until it consumed everything. The loan sharks who graduated to violent enforcers. The desperate deals that only dug him deeper. And finally, the moment when Senator Carver approached him with an offer that seemed like salvation. He knew about my debts, Richard explained. Knew I was drowning. He offered to pay everything off if I helped him destroy Luca Moretti. Said all I had to do was sign the marriage contract and provide security information. That you'd be protected. That it would just look dangerous, but no one would actually get hurt. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him. There's a difference. Richard's eyes were wet. By the time I realized Carver actually intended to kill you both, I was already trapped. He had evidence of my involvement. Said if I didn't follow through, he'd have me charged as an accessory and make sure I died in prison. So you chose yourself over me. I chose survival, and I've been dying inside ever since. He wiped his face roughly. Every day in Montana, I wake up thinking about what I did. About how close I came to losing you. About how I don't deserve to be called your father anymore. Vivian wanted to feel sympathy. Wanted to find some pathway to forgiveness. But all she felt was tired. Why are you really here, Dad? What do you want from me? Nothing. I just wanted you to know that somewhere beneath all the terrible choices and the weakness and the addiction, there's still a man who loves you, who's proud of the woman you became despite everything I put you through. His voice dropped to a whisper. And who'll spend the rest of his life trying to become someone worthy of being your father again. That's not possible. You can't undo what you did. I know. But maybe I can build something new from what's left. Richard reached into his jacket slowly, telegraphing the movement, pulled out an envelope. This is everything I know about Carver's other operations. Names, dates, crimes he's committed that didn't come out in the trial. I've been documenting it all in Montana. It's not much, but maybe it helps make sure he never gets out. Vivian took the envelope carefully, opened it to find dozens of handwritten pages detailing corruption that would keep prosecutors busy for years. Why give this to me? Because you're the only person I trust to do the right thing with it. He smiled sadly, and because maybe if I help destroy the man who used us both, that's one step toward redemption. Torres's voice crackled in Vivian's earpiece. We've cleared the immediate area. No threats detected, but we should wrap this up. Vivian studied her father's face, saw the genuine remorse there, the exhaustion, the desperate hope that maybe she'd offer some small forgiveness. Part of her wanted to believe people could change and families could heal, but the rest of her knew better. I'm not going to forgive you, she said finally. Not today. Maybe not ever. What you did was unforgivable. Richard nodded like he'd expected this. I understand, but... Vivian paused, choosing her words carefully. But I'm also not going to keep hating you. Hate takes energy I don't have anymore. So instead, I'm just going to let you go. You're not my father anymore. You're just Richard Hale, a man I used to know who made terrible choices. That's more than I deserve. It's all I have left to give. She tucked the envelope under her arm. Go back to Montana. Finish whatever Torres has you doing. Live your life. But don't contact me again. Don't try to rebuild something that's already dead. Vivian, goodbye, Dad. She walked away before he could say more, before the tears threatening to break through could actually fall. Torres materialized beside her as she cleared the dock area, his presence steady and professional. "You okay?" he asked. "No, but I will be." She handed him the envelope. "Make sure this gets to the right prosecutors." "Will do." He guided her toward the waiting SUV. "For what it's worth, you handled that better than most people would have." "I handled it the only way I could." The drive back to the estate passed in silence. Vivian stared out the window at Chicago's skyline, thinking about fathers and forgiveness and all the ways families broke each other. When they pulled through the gates, Luca was waiting on the front steps despite the cold. She collapsed into his arms the moment she reached him. He held her while she finally let the tears come. Not crying for her father exactly, crying for the relationship they'd never have, for the loss of something that had probably never really existed in the first place. "I'm proud of you," Luca whispered into her hair. "That took courage most people don't have. It just feels empty. Closure usually does, but empty is better than the alternative." He pulled back to look at her. "Come on. There's something I want to show you." He led her through the mansion to the east wing, the section he'd forbidden her from entering that first night. The doors were unlocked now. Inside was a series of rooms that had been completely renovated. Fresh paint, new furniture, sunlight streaming through clean windows. "What is this?" Vivian asked. "The Vivian Moretti Academy satellite office." Luca rolled into the main room where desks and computers had been arranged in a space clearly designed for administrative work. "I've been having it built for the past month. Thought you might want a headquarters for the foundation." Vivian stared at him. "What foundation?" "The one you're going to run." He pulled out a folder from his wheelchair's storage compartment. "I've established the Vivian Moretti Educational Foundation with an endowment of $50 million. Its mission is providing scholarships and educational resources to underprivileged kids across Chicago. You'll be the director, full control over operations and funding decisions." "Luca, you said you wanted to be a teacher, to make a difference." He held out the folder. "This is your chance, not just helping 20 kids in one classroom, helping thousands across the entire city." Vivian took the folder with shaking hands. Inside were incorporation documents, bank statements, mission statements, everything needed to operate a major charitable foundation, all with her name on them. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you deserve to build something that matters. Something that's yours, not connected to me or my empire or any of the violence." His voice softened. "And because I love you. And people who love each other help each other become who they're meant to be. I don't know how to run a foundation. You'll learn. I'll help. We'll hire people who know what they're doing." He caught her hand. "But the vision needs to be yours. The kids you help need to know their scholarships came from someone who understands what it's like to have dreams bigger than circumstances." Vivian looked around the office space, imagined it filled with staff working to change lives. Imagined kids receiving acceptance letters to colleges they never thought possible. Imagined building something good from all the darkness they'd survived. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it." The foundation launched 3 months later with a gala that attracted donors and politicians and community leaders from across Chicago. Vivian stood on stage in a blue dress, giving a speech about second chances and the transformative power of education. She was terrified. Her hands shook holding the microphone, but her voice stayed steady. "6 months ago, I was nobody," she told the assembled crowd. "I had no power, no resources, no way to change the world around me. But I had a dream of helping kids discover their potential. And now, thanks to the support of everyone in this room, that dream is becoming reality." The applause was thunderous. Luca watched from his table with pride evident in his eyes. When Vivian finished and returned to her seat beside him, he caught her hand and squeezed gently. "You're incredible," he whispered. "I'm terrified." "That's how you know it matters." He kissed her knuckles. "I'm so proud of you." The foundation grew quickly. Within 6 months, they'd awarded 50 scholarships. Within a year, 200. The kids who received them sent thank you letters that Vivian kept in a box in her office. Each one a reminder that survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about building something worth surviving for. Luca's empire evolved too. He transitioned more operations into legitimate businesses. The youth centers expanded. The violence decreased. He'd never be a good man by conventional standards. Too much blood on his hands for that. But he became a better man. The the kind who used power to protect instead of destroy. They married again on their first anniversary. Not because they had to, not because of contracts or obligations, just because they wanted to choose each other in front of people who mattered. The ceremony was small: staff, close friends, a few family members Luca had started reconciling with. Torres served as best man. Patricia Chen was Vivian's witness. They exchanged vows on the estate's terrace overlooking the gardens. Luca stood for the ceremony, braces locked around his legs and pain evident in his expression, but refusing to sit. When the officiant pronounced them married, his legs finally gave out and Vivian caught him. They collapsed together laughing while everyone cheered. "I told you I'd stand for you," he said, slightly breathless. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did. You deserve a husband who stands for you even when it hurts." "I deserve you exactly as you are." She kissed him while cameras flashed and their imperfect life stretched out ahead of them, full of possibility. The reception lasted until dawn, dancing and speeches and terrible jokes from Torres. At some point, Vivian found herself alone on the terrace, watching the sunrise over Chicago's skyline. The city looked peaceful from here, beautiful in ways she hadn't been able to see when she'd first arrived 6 months ago. Luca rolled up beside her. "What are you thinking?" "That I'm happy." The realization surprised her. After everything, after all the violence and fear and darkness, "I'm actually happy." "Me too." He caught her hand. "I never thought I'd feel this way again after Sarah. Thought that part of me died in the explosion. But you proved me wrong." "We proved each other wrong." Vivian leaned down to kiss him. "I thought I'd always be the girl my father destroyed. But I'm not. I'm someone new, someone stronger. We're both someone new." Luca's thumb brushed across her wedding ring, built from broken pieces but still whole. They sat in comfortable silence watching the city wake up. Somewhere in Chicago, kids were receiving scholarship letters that would change their lives. Somewhere, families were rebuilding after violence. Somewhere, people were surviving against odds that should have destroyed them. And here on this terrace, two people who'd found each other in the darkest circumstances possible were learning how to be happy despite everything trying to break them. It wasn't a perfect ending. Luca would always carry scars. Vivian would always remember shooting Marcus Volkov. Her father would always be the man who'd tried to have her killed. Senator Carver would rot in prison, but the corruption he represented would continue elsewhere. The world wouldn't suddenly become safe just because they'd survived. But they had survived, together, and that meant something. 3 years later, Vivian stood in the academy that bore her name, watching children who'd received scholarships graduate from high school. They walked across the stage in caps and gowns, heading toward futures that hadn't seemed possible before the foundation intervened. Some were going to college, others to trade schools. All of them were going somewhere better than where they'd started. Luca sat in the audience beside her, his wheelchair upgraded to something more comfortable but still necessary. The standing had caused permanent damage despite months of physical therapy. Some things couldn't be fixed, but he'd made peace with it, learned that strength came in forms that didn't require working legs. Their daughter, Sarah Rose, sat in Vivian's lap. 18 months old, with blonde hair and dark eyes that saw everything. She was named after the woman Luca lost and the possibility of new beginnings, a reminder that love could grow in the spaces where tragedy used to live. "Mama," Sarah Rose said, patting Vivian's face. "Why crying?" "Happy tears, baby, because we helped those kids up there." Vivian wiped her eyes. "Someday you'll understand." "She already understands more than we think," Luca said, catching his daughter's hand. "She's brilliant, gets it from her mother. And stubborn, gets that from her father." They watched the ceremony together while their daughter played with Vivian's necklace, and the students celebrated their futures. When it ended and everyone filed out toward the reception, Vivian and Luca stayed behind in the empty auditorium. "Do you ever regret it?" Vivian asked. "Buying that contract, agreeing to marry me?" "Every day." Luca's answer made her look at him sharply. "I regret that you had to go through everything you did. I regret not protecting you better. I regret that loving me put you in danger." He paused. "But I don't regret loving you. That's the only thing in my entire life I'll never regret. Even though it cost you so much? You didn't cost me anything. You gave me everything worth having." He looked at their daughter. "A family. A reason to be better. A future that doesn't end in violence." His eyes came back to Vivian's. You saved my life. Maybe not the dramatic way I saved yours, but you did. You made me human again." Vivian kissed him slowly while Sarah Rose giggled and grabbed at their faces. "We saved each other. That's what matters." They left the auditorium together, Luca rolling his wheelchair, Vivian carrying their daughter, both of them moving toward whatever came next. The foundation was expanding into 3 more cities. The youth centers kept growing. Luca's legitimate businesses thrived. Their family was happy in ways that surprised them daily. It wasn't the life either of them expected. Vivian had wanted to be a simple teacher. Luca had expected to die alone in his wheelchair, surrounded by enemies. Instead, they'd built something neither could have imagined, a life where broken pieces fit together into something stronger than what came before. That night, after Sarah Rose was asleep and the staff had gone home, Vivian and Luca sat on their terrace, watching storms roll in from the lake. Lightning cracked across the sky, rain began to fall. The city lights shimmered through the downpour like Chicago was being washed clean. "Do you remember our first night?" Vivian asked. "When you told me you didn't want my pity." "I remember everything about that night." Luca's hand found hers in the darkness. "I was terrified. Convinced you'd see me as less than a man because of this chair. Convinced I'd destroy you just by being near you. And now? Now I know better. You're not something I destroyed. You're the best thing I ever built." He pulled her into his lap, her favorite place to sit despite the wheelchair. "We're not perfect. We're damaged and complicated and probably still making mistakes. But we're real. And that's enough." "That's everything," Vivian corrected. They stayed there wrapped in each other while the storm raged, and the city endured and their daughter slept safely inside a home built from love instead of obligation. The contract that had brought them together was long destroyed. The debts paid, the enemies defeated. All that remained was the choice to stay, and they chose each other, every day, through every difficulty, through every moment of doubt, because that's what love was. Not the dramatic rescues or grand gestures, not the perfect moments or the easy days. Love was choosing to stay when everything said to run. Love was building something new from broken pieces. Love was seeing someone's scars and loving them not despite the damage, but because survival was beautiful in its own terrible way. Vivian Moretti had been sold like property to a man everyone called a monster. She'd survived assassination attempts and federal prosecution and family betrayal. She'd killed to defend herself and learned to live with the weight of that choice. She'd lost her father and gained a family. She'd been terrified and broken and remade into something stronger. And through it all, she'd discovered something her younger self never could have understood. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened. Sometimes the cage you're forced into becomes the place you finally learn to fly. Sometimes love doesn't arrive like rescue. It arrives like a mirror showing you who you were always meant to become. The forced bride became a willing wife. The feared mafia boss became a father. And together, they proved that redemption wasn't about erasing the darkness. It was about learning to carry it while still choosing light. Years from now, when Sarah Rose was old enough to understand, Vivian would tell her this story. Not the sanitized version, not the fairy tale. The real story with all its violence and fear and imperfect choices. Because their daughter deserved to know that her parents weren't heroes, they were survivors. And survival was the most heroic thing of all. But for now, in this moment, Vivian simply held Luca while rain fell and lightning illuminated their imperfect world. They'd survived the storm. They'd built something beautiful from the wreckage. And that was enough. That was everything. The rain continued falling over Chicago, washing away the past and leaving space for whatever came next. And inside the Moretti estate, 2 broken people who'd found each other in the darkness finally understood what it meant to be whole. Not perfect, not healed, just whole in the way that mattered most, together, imperfect, and choosing each other every single day for the rest of their lives.